Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy. Tonight you arrive just a little too late. A thin layer of ash drifts slowly through the air, settling softly on your shoulders, light as snow but warmer than it should be. You brush it away without thinking, only to notice how quiet everything is. No footsteps, no distant voices, not even the sound of wind. Just a stillness that feels unnatural. You take a slow breath, and there is a faint bitter taste in the air. It lingers longer than expected. You pause, because something here does not quite make sense, and the more you notice, the clearer it becomes. If you were truly standing here, you would not have time to understand it. You probably would not survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to share your location and local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights. Flow straight into the story. You stand at the edge of the forest and the ash continues to fall. It is not thick, not suffocating, just enough to notice. Each flake lands with a soft, dry whisper against your coat, melting into nothing against your skin. You glance upward, expecting clouds, but the sky is oddly clear. A pale, washed-out grey that seems too empty to explain what is happening. For a moment you wonder if it might be distant wildfire debris, the kind that can travel for miles. That at least would be a modern explanation, a comforting one. But comfort does not last long here. You take a step forward and the ground crunches, not quite snow, not quite frost, but something in between. The forest ahead stands still, each tree thin and dark, their branches dusted in white. No leaves, no movement, just rows of quiet trunks disappearing into shadow. And then it hits you. There is no wind. In most forests, even in winter, there's always something, branches shifting, a faint whistle between trunks, the soft hiss of distant air currents. But here nothing. The silence presses against your ears, heavy and complete, like stepping into a sealed room. You pause, listening harder. Still nothing. It reminds you oddly enough of accounts from Arctic expeditions. Early explorers often wrote about the eerie stillness of extreme cold, describing how sound seemed to vanish in sub-zero air. One British expedition member in the 19th century noted that the silence was so absolute it made him feel as though the world itself had stopped breathing. You understand that now standing here. You take another step, and another. The forest accepts you without resistance, but it offers no welcome either. Your boots leave faint impressions behind you, the ash and frost compressing together into shallow prints. You glance back once instinctively, as if to check that the path remains. It does. But already a thin veil of falling ash softens the edges, beginning the slow process of erasing your presence. That feels significant. There is a curious historical detail about travellers in cold regions. Many believed that being forgotten by the landscape was the true danger. Not wolves, not starvation, but the quiet way the environment could erase all trace of you within hours. Some Siberian folklore even suggested that the forest itself closed behind lone wanderers, as though it preferred not to be remembered. You try not to dwell on that. Instead, you focus on the physical sensations. The air is cold, yes, but not brutally so. Not yet. It sits just below comfort, a steady chill that slips through the seams of your clothing. Your breath appears faintly, a soft cloud that lingers longer than it should. You rub your hands together. Already there is a dryness in your throat, a slight tightening in your chest. Not alarming, just noticeable. The kind of detail you might ignore on an ordinary evening walk. But this is not an ordinary walk, and somewhere in the back of your mind you know it. You continue deeper. The trees begin to thicken their trunks closer together, now their branches knitting into a dim canopy above. The ash collects along the bark, outlining every ridge and crack, giving the forest a ghostly texture. It almost looks deliberate, as though someone has carefully dusted each surface. You reach out, brushing your fingers against a trunk. The bark is cold, colder than the air. That is when you notice something else. The smell. It is faint, but it is there, that same bitter note you caught earlier lingering at the back of your throat. Not quite smoke, not quite decay. Something in between. You inhale again more carefully this time, and the taste sharpens slightly like burnt wood carried from far away. There is a well-documented phenomenon in history where volcanic eruptions caused ash to fall hundreds of miles from their source. After the eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815, ash darkened skies across continents, leading to what became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed, temperatures dropped, and people described strange dim days where the sun seemed permanently veiled. You wonder briefly if something like that could explain this, but there is no distant rumble, no sign of fire, only the quiet. You walk on. Time begins to stretch in subtle ways. Without wind, without sound, without changing light, it becomes difficult to judge how long you've been moving. Minutes feel longer, steps feel slower. Your thoughts begin to echo slightly as though they too are affected by the stillness. At one point you stop again, turning slowly in place. The forest looks the same in every direction. This is not unusual, of course. Many forests create that effect, especially in winter, when landmarks disappear under snow. But there is something particularly uniform here, something almost deliberate in the repetition of tree and shadow. You frown slightly. Historians still argue whether early forest travellers truly experienced disorientation as quickly as their accounts suggest, or whether those stories were shaped by fear and storytelling traditions. But standing here, you begin to suspect those accounts might have been entirely accurate, because already you are unsure of your direction. You pick one forward, you decide, and keep going. The ash continues to fall. It settles into your hair, your shoulders, the folds of your clothing. It does not melt like snow, nor does it accumulate like proper powder. It simply rests there, light and persistent, as though it intends to stay. You brush it away again, a small automatic gesture, and for a moment you almost laugh. Because this is how it starts, isn't it? Not with panic, not with drama. Just small, quiet discomforts, a strange silence, an unfamiliar smell, a path that seems just a little too empty. You take another step, then another, and somewhere far deeper in the forest something shifts. Not a sound exactly, more like the suggestion of movement, a subtle change in the stillness as though the air itself has adjusted. You freeze, listening. Nothing follows. Of course it doesn't. Still, you find yourself holding your breath for a second longer than necessary, waiting for confirmation that you are not alone. But the forest gives you nothing, only the ash, only the cold, and the growing quiet understanding that you may not find shelter before night fully settles in. You keep moving, though the idea of stopping begins to linger at the edges of your thoughts. It would be easy to pause, just for a moment, just long enough to rest your legs, to gather your bearings, to convince yourself that this is all manageable. But something deeper, older, quieter nudges you forward. A sense that stillness here is not your ally. So you walk. The forest grows denser, the trees crowding closer, as if conspiring to narrow your path. Branches stretch across your way, thin and brittle, brushing softly against your shoulders. Each contact feels louder than it should, the faint scrape of wood against fabric echoing strangely in the silence. You begin to notice how exposed you are. No walls, no roof, no fire, not even the suggestion of shelter. It is a simple realization, but it lands heavily. Historically, travellers feared this moment more than almost anything else. Exposure, just being out in the elements, has always been one of the most efficient killers. Not dramatic, not immediate, but steady and patient. In fact, records from early alpine crossings show that far more people died from cold and exhaustion than from avalanches or wild animals. The mountain, like this forest, did not need to attack. It only needed to wait. You pull your coat tighter around you. The cold has deepened slightly. Not enough to shock, but enough to settle in. It presses gently against your skin, seeping through layers with quiet persistence. Your fingers flex inside your gloves, testing their warmth. Still functional, still responsive. For now, You glance around again more deliberately this time. Shelter. That is the priority. But what counts as shelter here? The trees offer no real cover. Their branches are too high, their trunks too narrow. There are no rocks, no cliffs, no obvious hollows. Just an endless repetition of vertical lines fading into shadow. You move toward a slightly thicker cluster of trunks, hoping for some kind of natural barrier. The ground dips slightly there, forming a shallow depression. It is not much, but it feels different. A break in the pattern. You step down into it. Immediately the air feels a fraction stiller, which is impressive considering how still it already was. The ash collects more heavily here, gathering in soft layers along the edges. You crouch, brushing it aside with your hand, half expecting to find something beneath. Nothing, just frozen earth. Still you linger for a moment. There is something instinctive about seeking lower ground. Even ancient survival traditions often emphasized it. Valleys could block wind dips, could trap warmth. Even slight depressions might offer a marginal advantage. Not comfort exactly, but less exposure. You consider staying here. Just for a while. But then a small inconvenient thought interrupts you. Cold sinks. It's one of those simple facts that becomes very important very quickly. In winter conditions, lower ground can collect colder air, turning shallow dips into quiet traps. A place that feels sheltered can also be the coldest spot around. You sigh softly, pushing yourself back to your feet. So much for that idea. There is a curious, almost amusing historical tidbit about early travellers in cold regions. Some carried small portable shelters made of oiled cloth or animal skins, which could be quickly assembled into crude tents. Not particularly warm, not especially sturdy, but enough to break the wind and hold a bit of heat. Of course, those were heavy, awkward things. Not something you happen to have tucked into your pocket tonight. Unfortunate. You step out of the depression and continue forward. The forest floor begins to change underfoot. The crunch softens slightly, replaced by a firmer, more compact surface. You look down, noticing faint irregularities, subtle lines, and flattened patches that do not quite match the randomness of nature. A path, perhaps. Old, nearly erased, but still there. You follow it. It winds gently between the trees, curving just enough to suggest intention. Someone at some point walked this way often enough to leave a trace. That alone feels oddly reassuring. Where there is a path, there might be a destination. You quicken your pace slightly. The ash continues to fall, but the canopy above thickens just enough to catch some of it. The air here feels marginally clearer, the bitter taste fading for a moment. You inhale deeply, appreciating the change even if it is small. Then you notice something else. The light is fading. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. The grey sky dims toward a deeper shade, the shadows between trees growing heavier. Evening is arriving, whether you're ready for it or not. You are not. You scan the surroundings again, more urgently now. There has to be something. A fallen tree, perhaps. A cluster of branches dense enough to crawl beneath. Even a shallow overhang. Anything that breaks the open exposure of the forest. You veer slightly off the path, drawn by a darker shape between the trunks. It turns out to be a fallen log half buried in ash and frost. You approach it cautiously, nudging it with your boot. Solid. Stable. You crouch beside it, running your hand along its length. The wood is cold, but not completely frozen through. There is a faint give beneath the surface. You consider it. In some survival traditions, fallen logs were used as windbreaks, their bulk shielding one side of the body from exposure. Not perfect, but better than nothing. You could sit with your back against it, conserve heat, wait out the night. The idea is tempting. Too tempting. Because waiting, you realize, might not be enough. Historians still debate whether early accounts of winter survival exaggerated the dangers of inactivity, or whether the fear of sleeping cold was entirely justified. But modern understanding leans toward caution. Staying still in cold conditions often accelerates heat loss. The body needs movement, even minimal, to maintain warmth. You exhale slowly. So sitting here all night is not ideal. You stand again, brushing ash from your knees. The path calls you back. It is faint, barely visible now as the light continues to fade, but it is still the closest thing you have to direction. You return to it, placing one foot carefully in front of the other, following its gentle curves deeper into the forest. Your thoughts begin to narrow. Less wandering, more focus. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The cold presses closer now, wrapping around your legs, your arms, your face. Not painful yet, but insistent. You roll your shoulders, flex your hands again, testing. Still functional, but slower. You cannot stay exposed much longer. Somewhere ahead you tell yourself there must be something more than trees and ash, some remnant of human presence. A structure, a clearing, even the ruins of something forgotten. The path suggests it, and you follow, because the alternative, stopping, waiting, hoping, is beginning to feel less like a choice and more like a quiet surrender, and you are not ready for that. Not yet. You keep moving though now, each step feels just slightly heavier than the last. At first it is subtle. A small resistance in your legs, a faint stiffness in your fingers. The kind of thing you might blame on fatigue or the awkward rhythm of walking through uneven ground. But as you continue along the fading path, the sensation grows clearer. The cold is no longer just around you. It is beginning to move in. You notice it most in your hands. Even inside your gloves, your fingers feel less responsive, as though they belong to someone else. You flex them again, slower this time, watching carefully. They move, but not with the same ease as before. You tuck them under your arms for a moment, pressing them against your sides. The warmth there is faint, but it helps. A little. There is a well-known historical observation from polar explorers that the early stages of freezing are often deceptively mild. Men would write in their journals about a gentle numbness, a kind of quiet dulling of sensation that seemed almost comforting. Only later did they realize how dangerous that comfort could be. The body, in its effort to conserve heat, begins to withdraw warmth from the extremities first. Fingers, toes, ear small sacrifices for the sake of survival. You release your hands, letting them swing again as you walk. You cannot afford to lose function. The path beneath you becomes harder to follow now. The ash and frost blur its edges and the dimming light does not help. You lean forward slightly, eyes scanning the ground, searching for any hint of direction. They're just ahead, a faint indentation. You follow it. The forest shifts almost imperceptibly as you move. The trees here are older, their trunks thicker, their bark darker. Some lean at slight angles as though pushed long ago by winds that no longer visit this place. Their branches creak faintly, not from wind, but from the slow contraction of wood in the cold. The sound startles you at first. It is the first real noise you've heard since entering the forest. You stop listening. A soft, dry groan echoes somewhere above you, followed by a faint crack. It fades quickly, swallowed by the stillness, but it lingers in your mind. Sound travels strangely in cold air, denser, clearer. Even the smallest noise can seem sharper, more defined. Early winter travellers often relied on this listening for distant rivers, shifting ice, or even the movement of animals far beyond their sight. But the same clarity could also play tricks, turning ordinary sounds into something unsettling. You shake your head slightly as if to clear it. Focus. Step, breathe, step, breathe. Your breath is more visible now, each exhale forming a thicker cloud that drifts slowly before dissolving. You notice how long it lingers, how reluctant it seems to disappear. The air feels heavier, thicker somehow, as though it resists movement. You pull your collar higher. The bitter taste in the air has returned, faint but persistent. It settles at the back of your tongue, a reminder that whatever is falling from the sky is not entirely harmless. You swallow, trying to ignore it. Ahead, the trees thin, slightly opening into a narrow stretch where the ground dips and rises again. You follow, stepping carefully over uneven patches of frozen earth. Your foot slips, just slightly, but it is enough. You catch yourself, quickly regaining balance, but your heart jumps in your chest, the sudden movement sending a sharp pulse of awareness through your body. You stand still for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the tension settle. Falls in cold environments are more dangerous than they seem. Even a minor injury can become serious when temperatures drop, when mobility is limited, when help is nowhere near. There are accounts from early expeditions where a single twisted ankle led to entire groups failing to return. Not because the injury was severe, but because it slowed them down just enough. You take a careful step forward, then another. No more slipping. You adjust your pace slower now, more deliberate. Each foot placed with intention, each movement controlled. The cold continues its quiet work. You feel it in your face now, a tightening across your cheeks, a slight numbness along your nose. You touch it briefly just to confirm. The skin is cold but still sensitive. For now, there is a strange, almost forgotten belief from certain northern cultures that the cold itself was a living presence, not malicious exactly, but aware. It was said to test those who entered its domain, probing for weakness, waiting for mistakes. A poetic idea, perhaps, but standing here feeling the steady, patient pressure of the temperature, you begin to understand why such beliefs took hold. It does feel like something is watching, not in the sense of eyes or movement, but in the way the environment responds to you. Every pause, every misstep, every moment of stillness feels noticed. You shake that thought away. Fatigue is beginning to creep in. Not overwhelming, not yet, but present. Your legs feel heavier, your steps less automatic. You roll your shoulders again, trying to keep your body engaged to maintain movement. Because stopping would be easy. Too easy. There is another curious historical detail. People suffering from early hypothermia often report a growing sense of calm, even drowsiness. A desire to rest, to sit, to simply close their eyes for a moment. It is one of the most dangerous signals the body can send. You blink slowly. No, not yet. You keep walking. The forest darkens further, the last traces of daylight fading into a dim bluish grey. The ash continues to fall, though you barely notice it now. It has become part of the background, like the trees, like the cold. Everything is blending together. You focus on small things instead. The sound of your steps, the rhythm of your breath, the faint creak of wood above you. And then you hear something else, a soft crunch somewhere behind you. You freeze. Your breath stops your body stilling completely as you listen. This silence returns immediately heavy and complete, but the memory of that sound lingers. You turn your head slowly. Nothing. Just trees, ash, shadow. You wait. Seconds stretch longer than they should. No second sound comes. Historians still argue whether reports of phantom footsteps in isolated environments were purely psychological or the result of subtle environmental cues, echoes shifting ground distant animals. But in this moment, standing alone in the deepening dark, the distinction feels unimportant, because whether real or imagined, the effect is the same. You are not entirely at ease anymore. You turn back toward the path, and you walk. Because whatever lies ahead, shelter, danger, or simply more forest, it is still better than standing still, wondering what might be following just beyond the edge of your hearing. You walk on, and the forest begins to speak in the only language it seems willing to use. Not voices, not words, nothing of that kind. Just timber. A low creak passes overhead, slow and weary, like an old door opening somewhere in a house no one has lived in for years. Then another answers from farther away. A tiny snap comes from your left, sharp enough to make your shoulders rise. You stop listening, and the sound fades into the stillness as though it never happened. The trees are not moving in any visible way. That makes it worse, naturally. You look up into the dark lattice of branches. Frost coats the upper limbs, turning them pale against the deepening sky. Each branch holds its own little burden of ash snow and frozen moisture. Under that weight, wood shifts. Fibers tighten, bark contracts. Nothing supernatural is required, which is excellent news because the natural version is already doing quite enough. In cold forests, trees can crack loudly when moisture inside them freezes and expands. In parts of northern Europe and North America, people once called these sounds frost cracks, and travellers described them as sudden reports in the night, almost like musket fire. Imagine trying to sleep through that beside a dying campfire. Very peaceful, very relaxing, absolutely no reason to reconsider every life choice. You continue slowly now. The path is almost gone, but sound has begun to guide you. You notice how your own steps change depending on the ground. A dry crunch where frost lies thin, a duller press where ash has gathered, a hollow note where roots run close beneath the surface. Without meaning to, you start listening to the forest floor the way a person might read a map. You place one boot carefully, crunch, another, crunch, then a soft scrape as your sole brushes hidden bark. You adjust your direction. It is strange how quickly the senses rearrange themselves when sight becomes unreliable. The dimness ahead is too uniform to trust. Every tree resembles every other tree. Every shadow looks like an opening until you approach and find more trunks, waiting there, patient and unhelpful. But sound gives tiny clues. It tells you where the ground hardens, where branches hang low, where something brittle lies across your way. A faint tapping begins somewhere above. You tilt your head. Tap, pause, tap. A loose twig perhaps knocking gently against another branch. The rhythm is uneven, almost thoughtful. You stand beneath it for several breaths before deciding not to stand directly under anything that is tapping in a frozen forest at night. A wise policy and one that requires no university degree. You step aside. Moments later, a small branch drops behind you with a soft thud. You look back. The branch lies across your previous footprints, thin and pale, dusted with ash. You stare at it for a moment longer than necessary. It is not large. It would not have hurt much. Still, the timing feels personal. You keep moving. The air grows colder against your face. Your nose feels stiff now, your lips dry. When you breathe through your mouth, the bitterness in the air settles on your tongue. When you breathe through your nose, the cold bites more sharply. Neither option wins. Wonderful. The trees creak again, and this time the sound travels from one side of the forest to the other, as if some unseen pressure is passing through the woods. You imagine the trunks leaning, resisting, answering each other in slow wooden murmurs. Long before written maps were common people moving through forests, often navigated by remembered sound as much as sight. Streams, mills, church bells, cowbells, and even the direction of axes in managed woodlands could help a traveller understand where they were. In medieval Europe, bells were sometimes rung during storms or heavy fog, partly for ritual reasons, partly because sound could pull lost people towards settlement. Tonight there are no bells, only timber and your own breathing. You pause beside a wide pine. Its trunk is rough beneath your glove, ridged and dark with resin frozen in amber beads along one seam. You lean close and smell it. For one soft second, the bitter ash is replaced by a clean, sharp scent. Pine resin. Cold bark. Something almost medicinal. The smell steadies you. People in many forested regions once used resin for waterproofing, wound-covering, torch-making and sealing containers. Some northern communities even chewed bits of hardened resin like a kind of rough forest gum. Not exactly minty fresh, but history rarely offers convenient branding. You rub your thumb over one frozen bead and feel it resist. Too hard to gather, too cold to be useful, so you leave it where it is. Another creak rolls overhead. This one is deeper. Not a snap, not a twig, but a full-bodied groan from a trunk under strain. You freeze, scanning upward, trying to identify the source. The canopy is layered and confusing. Branches cross branches. Shadows mask shapes. Every dark limb looks stable until you imagine it falling. You take 3 careful steps away from the sound. Then 5 more. The groaning stops. You exhale. Some researchers continue to question how reliably travellers in past centuries could interpret forest sounds, especially in unfamiliar terrain. Were those old accounts practical knowledge sharpened by necessity, or were later writers romanticising woodland skill? Standing here you find the debate less abstract. Whether or not anyone could truly master these sounds You are trying very hard to learn them quickly. A rustle comes from the ground to your right. You turn, nothing visible, only a small mound of snow and ash at the base of a tree. Then the mound trembles. A tiny shape darts out quick as a thrown shadow and vanishes beneath another root. A mouse, perhaps, or a vole. Something small enough to survive by tunnels and instinct. You almost smile. Life is still here, hidden quiet, unimpressed by your dramatic situation. In winter, small mammals often move beneath the snow in a hidden layer between ground and snowpack. Naturalists call this space the subnivean zone, a secret little underworld where mice and voles can travel, feed, and avoid some predators. A whole bustling neighbourhood under your boots. No rent control probably, but decent insulation. The thought comforts you more than it should. You are not alone in the forest then. Not alone, but not accompanied either. There is a difference. You continue along the ghost of the path, listening now with more care. The forest no longer feels silent. It feels restrained, as if every sound is small because everything here is conserving itself. Trees creak only when they must. Snow shift only when weight demands it. Animals move only when survival requires motion. And you with your loud boots and visible breath are the least subtle creature for miles. A branch brushes your hat. You duck instinctively, then raise a hand to clear the way. The twigs are brittle and cold. Some snap at your touch, falling like thin bones into the snow. You wince at the noise. Then you stop. Ahead through the trunks there is a different darkness. Not shadow between trees. Something lower, wider. You narrow your eyes. It might be a fallen tree. It might be a rock. It might be nothing more than your tired mind offering shapes, because it is tired of seeing the same vertical lines. Still it breaks the pattern. You move toward it. The sounds change beneath your feet again. Less crunch, more hollow thud. You slow down, testing the ground before each step. A hidden root catches your boot, and you stumble forward, catching yourself against a trunk. The bark scrapes your glove. Your heart gives one startled kick. You stand there, breathing carefully. The dark shape waits ahead. The forest creaks above you long and low, as if reminding you that every answer here comes slowly. So you listen. You listen to the wood. You listen to the ground. You listen to your own breath, steady, but thinner now in the cold. And then you move again toward the low dark shape, because in a frozen forest with no shelter, even a shadow can become a possibility. You approach the dark shape with careful steps, your body already bracing for disappointment. And of course it delivers. It is not a shelter, not a cave, not structure, not even a particularly useful formation. Just a cluster of fallen branches tangled together around a half-rotted trunk, the whole thing slumped low against the ground like a collapsed idea. You stand there for a moment staring at it as if it might improve under closer inspection. It does not. Still you crouch, because even a poor option deserves a second look when the alternatives are worse. You push aside a few brittle limbs, testing their flexibility. They crack softly, fragments falling into the ash with dry little sighs. The interior is darker, slightly shielded from above. Not warm, not even close, but less exposed than the open forest. You lean closer. The air inside the tangle feels different. Stale, perhaps. Still. It traps something, even if that something is only the absence of movement. You sit back on your heels, thinking. Fire. The word arrives uninvited, but once it is there, it refuses to leave. You glance at your hands, then at the branches. Fire would change everything. Warmth, lighter sense of control. Humans have been chasing that advantage for a very long time. There is evidence that controlled use of fire dates back at least several 100,000 years, possibly even earlier. Early humans did not just use it for warmth. It reshaped their lives entirely. Cooking food, extending daylight hours, protecting against predators. Fire is not just comfort. It is survival distilled into flame. You look down at the wood again. Damp, cold, uncooperative. You reach for a smaller twig and snap it between your fingers. It breaks cleanly, but the sound is dull, not sharp. Moisture still lingers inside. You rub the broken ends together, feeling the slight give. Not ideal. There is a lesser-known detail about fire-making in cold environments. The biggest challenge is often not the flame itself, but the preparation. Dry tinder proper kindling insulation from the ground, without those even a spark, struggles to become anything more. Some Arctic cultures carried carefully preserved embers wrapped in moss or bark, allowing them to revive a fire rather than start from nothing. A practical solution, though, unfortunately not one you can borrow tonight. You check your pockets anyway. Of course, nothing useful. You consider the branches again. You could try. Gather smaller pieces, break them down, attempt to create something. But even as the thought forms, you recognize its weakness. Without proper dry material, without a reliable ignition source, you would spend precious energy for very little return, an energy you are beginning to realize as a currency you cannot waste. You exhale slowly, a thin cloud drifting in front of you. So no fire, at least not here. You push yourself back to your feet. The act feels slightly more effortful than before. Your legs respond, but with a hint of reluctance, as though they have begun negotiating terms. You stamp your boots lightly, encouraging circulation, then roll your shoulders again. Movement is warmth, or at least the closest thing to it. You take one last look at the tangled branches. For a moment you imagine what it would be like to crawl inside, curl up and wait. The space is small and closed, almost inviting in its own bleak way. Too inviting. There is a quiet danger in spaces that suggest rest when rest is not what you need. Across different regions, there have been persistent beliefs about false shelters in the wilderness, places that appear safe, but ultimately trap cold air or limit escape. Some Scandinavian tales even warned of forest spirits that lured travellers into hollow spaces to sleep only for them never to wake. Charming bedtime stories clearly designed to encourage good decision-making. You step away from the branches. The forest seems to approve, though it says nothing. The light has dimmed further now, shifting from grey to something closer to blue-black. The outlines of trees blur at their edges, merging into a continuous wall of vertical shadow. You blink, trying to sharpen your vision, but there is only so much your eyes can do. You will have to rely on more than sight. You start walking again, slower this time, placing each step with intention. The ground beneath you feels colder, firmer. The ash layer is thinned slightly, replaced by harder frost. Your boots make a sharper sound now, each step crisp and distinct. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The rhythm steadies you. Your breath follows it, in and out, in time with your movement. You focus on that pattern, letting it anchor you. When your thoughts begin to wander toward warmth, toward comfort, toward the very appealing idea of not being here, you pull them back to the simple mechanics of walking. Step, breathe, head the tree shift again. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. The spacing changes, the trunk slightly farther apart, the branches higher. The forest opens just a fraction, creating a narrow corridor where the sky is more visible. You glance upward. Stars. Faint at first, barely visible through the lingering haze, but there. Small points of light piercing the grey. The sight is almost startling after so much muted darkness. For a moment you feel a quiet sense of relief. The sky is still there. It sounds like an obvious statement, but in this environment it matters. It means you're not entirely enclosed, not completely cut off. There is still a world beyond the trees, even if it feels distant. You keep moving beneath that thin strip of sky. The cold presses in more firmly now, settling into your arms, your legs, your core. It is no longer just a presence, it is an influence. Your movements are slower, your reactions slightly delayed. You notice it in small ways, how long it takes to adjust your footing, how your hands hesitate before responding. You flex your fingers again, still working, but not forever. There is a subtle, almost ironic detail about the human relationship with fire. For all our dependence on it, we are remarkably fragile without it in cold environments. Remove that one element and centuries of advancement begin to feel very thin. Tonight, you're experiencing that gap firsthand. You step over a low branch, your boot catching slightly before clearing it. You correct your balance quickly, but the motion feels clumsy. You frown. That is new. You slow your pace even further, focusing more carefully on each movement. Precision matters now. Small mistakes carry larger consequences. A faint sound reaches you again. Not the creak of wood, not the crack of frost. Something softer. A distant rustle, perhaps. Or the whisper of something moving through branches. You stop. Listen. The sound fades, leaving only the steady rhythm of your own breathing. You wait a moment longer, just in case. Nothing. You nod slightly to yourself, as if acknowledging the forest's quiet refusal to explain itself. Then you continue, because whatever warmth you might have imagined creating back there among the fallen branches was never going to last. And here, in the deepening cold, with the stars just beginning to show themselves overhead, you understand something simple and unavoidable. Fire is not an idea, it is a necessity. And without it, this night is going to be much longer than you would like. You leave the failed promise of fire behind and follow the faint corridor between the trees. The stars are visible only in fragments caught between black branches and drifting ash. They give almost no light, but they give direction, and direction feels like luxury now. You keep your head slightly lowered, not from defeat, but because the ground has become more important than the sky. That is when you see the first footprint. You stop so suddenly that your breath catches. They're just ahead of your boot, pressed into the thin crust of snow and ash as a clear mark. Not yours. Too narrow, too angled, with a deeper point at one end. You crouch carefully, knees protesting in the cold, and lean closer. An animal track? Probably. You study it as if you've become an expert in wilderness tracking, which is bold considering your qualifications consist mostly of concern and poor lighting. The mark is partly filled with ash, its edges softened, but it is real. Something passed here before you. You glance around. The forest remains still. Another print lies beyond it, then another forming a line that crosses your path and disappears between the trees. The spacing is measured delicate, almost careful. Not the chaotic scamper of a small animal. Not the heavy drag of something large. Something in between. A fox, perhaps. In many winter landscapes, fox tracks are famously neat, often appearing as a straight line of small prints, one paw placed nearly in front of the other. Historical hunters and trappers knew how to read these patterns with remarkable skill. A single trail could tell them not only the animal, but its pace direction and sometimes even its mood. You meanwhile are hoping the print does not belong to anything that considers humans an interesting late-night snack. You stand slowly. The tracks cross from right to left. You consider following them, not because the animal knows where shelter is exactly, but because animals choose paths for reasons. They avoid deep snow. They seek cover. They know the terrain in ways humans only pretend to understand after buying one sturdy jacket. You take one cautious step along the track line. Then another. The prints lead you away from the faint human path if it was ever truly human at all. This feels risky. But the original path has nearly vanished, swallowed by darkness and ash, while the animal trail remains visible in short segments beneath the trees. You follow it. The forest changes again, becoming tighter, more tangled. Low branches snag at your sleeves. Needles brush your face cold and sharp. The ground dips and rises, but the tracks choose the easiest route, weaving around obstacles before you would have noticed them. A small advantage. You accept it gratefully. After several minutes you see more prints. These are different. Larger, rounder, less tidy. You stop. They overlap the first set crossing at an angle. The edges are blurred, but the impression is unmistakably heavier. Your mind supplies unhelpful possibilities with impressive speed. Wolf, lynx, large dog, very ambitious house cat. You crouch again, though your knees are not thrilled about this repeated scholarly field work. The print is old, perhaps older than the ashfall. Frost has hardened inside it. No fresh powder marks the rim. Whatever made it is likely far away. Likely? That word does a lot of work in the wilderness. Medieval bestiaries, those wonderfully strange books that mixed animal description with moral lessons, often turned tracks into symbols. A fox could mean cunning. A wolf could mean danger. A hare could mean fear. Actual woodsmen probably found this less useful than knowing which direction the animal went, but people have always liked turning nature into a lecture. You rise looking from one trail to the other. The smaller prints continue forward. The larger ones angle deeper into the trees. You choose the smaller trail. A very reasonable decision. The cold has settled into your feet now. Not painfully, but with a dull, dense feeling that makes each step less precise. You wiggle your toes inside your boots. They respond, though slowly. You try again. Better. Keep circulation moving. Keep thinking. Keep walking. The fox trail, if it is a fox trail, leads you toward a line of darker trees, where the branches hang lower and thicker. The canopy blocks some of the falling ash, and beneath it the ground is less crusted. The air feels enclosed, almost warmer, though you know that may be imagination. Still you enter. The smell changes immediately. Less ash, more resin, damp bark, old needles, frozen earth. You breathe in through your nose carefully, and the scent feels grounding. Pine and spruce have provided shelter tools, fuel medicine, and symbolism across countless cultures. In northern Europe, evergreen boughs were sometimes brought indoors in winter, long before modern holiday traditions took shape, a reminder of life persisting through cold months. Here beneath these branches you understand the comfort of that idea. A print appears beside a root, then another, then none. The trail vanishes. You stop beneath the evergreens, scanning the ground. The ash is thinner here, the surface broken by roots and needle litter. Tracks disappear into texture. The animal has left you, which seems rude, though understandable. You take a slow turn. The trees here stand close enough to form partial walls. Not shelter, not truly, but cover. The branches droop low, layered with frost and needles. If you crouched beneath them, you might be shielded from falling ash. You might even escape some radiating cold from the open sky. Might. The word returns. You are tired of might. You step deeper into the cluster, brushing aside a curtain of branches. They release a faint dusting of crystals over your sleeves. Inside the ground is uneven but softer. Needles have accumulated here for years, creating a springy mat beneath the frost. You press your boot down and feel a slight give. This is better than open ground. Not good. Better. You crouch, then pause. A few feet ahead, near the base of a trunk, something disturbs the needle layer. More tracks. But these are strange. Not animal, at least not clearly. A long depression, then a scuff, then what looks almost like the partial shape of a boot heel. Your chest tightens. You lean closer. It could be a broken branch imprint. It could be an old human track distorted by thaw and freeze. It could be your mind arranging random marks into a pattern, because the brain loves making stories, especially when inconveniently alone in a frozen forest. You stare. The possible boot print points deeper into the evergreens. For several breaths you do not move. There is a debate among historians of travel writing about how often lost wanderer accounts include imagined signs of other people. A footprint, a distant light, a voice, a smoke smell. Some scholars see these as literary devices, small sparks of hope, placed deliberately in the story. Others suspect they reflect real psychological responses to isolation, when the mind begins searching desperately for evidence of rescue. You're beginning to appreciate both interpretations. You stand slowly. The mark remains there ambiguous and silent. You could follow it. You could ignore it. You could stay under the trees and conserve what little comfort this place offers. Then from somewhere ahead, beyond the dark green curtain of branches, comes a soft sound. Not a crack. Not a creak. A crunch. One step. Then nothing. You hold perfectly still. Your breath clouds in front of your face. The forest waits with you. And whether the sound belongs to an animal, another person, or only the shifting cold, you find yourself turning toward it, because a footprint in the snow is never just a mark. It is a question. And tonight you're cold enough to want an answer. You stand beneath the low branches listening to the echo of that single crunch fade into nothing. It does not repeat. Of course it does not. If this forest has taught you anything so far, it is that it offers just enough to keep you moving, never enough to reassure you. You wait a few breaths longer, straining your ears, but the stillness settles back in like a blanket. Slowly you exhale, your attention drifts back to your body. That you realize might be the more immediate concern. Hunger! It arrives quietly, almost politely, as if it does not want to interrupt the cold's ongoing work. A faint hollow feeling somewhere beneath your ribs. Not sharp, not urgent, but noticeable. You swallow. And then there is thirst. That one surprises you more. The air is so cold that you would expect to feel numb-dulled, disconnected from ordinary needs. Instead, your mouth feels dry, your tongue thick, as though the cold has quietly drawn moisture away from you. Each breath seems to carry something out, leaving less behind. You lick your lips. It helps for about a second. There is a simple but important detail about survival in winter conditions that often goes overlooked. Dehydration can happen quickly, even in freezing temperatures. Early explorers sometimes underestimated this, assuming the cold reduced the body's need for water. In reality, the dry air and increased breathing can lead to fluid loss just as surely as heat. You consider the ash drifting through the air. Drinking snow or ice might seem like a solution, but here that idea feels questionable. The faint bitterness in the air does not inspire confidence. You crouch briefly, scooping a small handful of snow and ash together, holding it near your face. It smells wrong. You drop it immediately, so no easy answers there. You stand again slower this time, your legs reminding you that they are not entirely pleased with repeated crouching. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, encouraging circulation, then resume walking beneath the low canopy. The branches brush your shoulders, whispering softly as you pass. The sound is almost comforting now, a reminder that the forest is not entirely silent, just selective in what it chooses to reveal. You think about food, not because you expect to find any, but because the mind tends to wander toward familiar comforts when under stress. Warm meals, simple things, bread perhaps, soup, something that does not require explanation. Historically, winter travelers often carried compact high-energy foods, dried meat, hard biscuits, nuts, things that would not spoil easily. Sailors and soldiers alike relied on such rations, though they are not always enjoyable. Hardtack, for example, was famously durable and famously unappetizing, sometimes surviving longer than the people meant to eat it. You almost smile at that. The idea of food that outlasts its owner feels strangely appropriate tonight. Your stomach tightens slightly. Still manageable. You keep moving. The evergreen cluster begins to thin the branches, lifting higher as the trees spread apart again. You step out from beneath them and immediately feel the difference. The air is sharper here, more exposed. The ash falls more freely, dusting your shoulders once more. You glance back at the shelter of needles behind you. It was not much, but it was something, and now it is gone. The ground ahead slopes gently downward, and you follow it without much thought. Movement has become automatic, now guided more by instinct than decision. You trust your feet to find the easiest path, your body to maintain its rhythm. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The cold deepens again. You feel it in your core now, a subtle tightening that spreads outward. Your movements grow slightly slower, your reactions just a fraction delayed. You notice it when you adjust your footing, when you turn your head, when you blink. Nothing dramatic, just less. There is an odd, lesser-known practice from certain northern regions where travellers would deliberately eat small amounts of snow, not for hydration, but to stimulate the body. The cold shock in the mouth was thought to keep people alert, to prevent the creeping drowsiness that could become dangerous. Whether it was effective or simply another tradition shaped by necessity is unclear, but the idea lingers in your mind. You consider it, then decide against it. The ash alone is enough to discourage experimentation. A faint sound reaches you again. Not the crunch from before. Something softer, a distant, almost rhythmic rustle. You stop. Listen. The sound comes and goes, barely there, like the brushing of fabric against wood. It could be branches shifting or something moving just out of sight. You turn your head slowly, trying to locate it. Nothing obvious. The forest remains a collection of shadows and pale outlines. You continue walking, but your attention sharpens. Every sound now carries weight, every movement a potential signal. You find yourself pausing more often, listening longer, trying to separate real noise from your imagined patterns. Because the mind, you realize, is beginning to play its own games. There is a curious pattern noted in accounts of long periods of isolation. People begin to assign meaning to ordinary sounds. A creak becomes a step. A rustle becomes a voice. The brain, starved for interaction, starts to fill in gaps. You exhale slowly. You are not there yet, but you understand how it happens. The ground levels out and the trees open slightly once more. The sky above is darker now, the stars clearer in the gaps. You glance up briefly, letting your eyes adjust to their faint light. They offer no warmth, but they offer distance, a reminder that the world is larger than this forest, larger than this moment. You lower your gaze again. Ahead the terrain shifts. The snow appears smoother, less broken by roots and debris. A wide pale stretch between the trees, almost like a clearing, though not quite open. The surface looks undisturbed, untouched by tracks or movement. You approach cautiously. Your first step onto it feels different, softer, hollow. You freeze. Your weight shifts slightly and the surface gives just a fraction beneath you. Not enough to break, not enough to alarm completely, but enough to send a quiet signal through your body. Something is different here. You step back, carefully. The ground beneath your original position feels solid again, reassuringly firm. You look at the smooth expanse ahead now with more suspicion. Snow can hide many things. Rocks' roots dips, and sometimes emptiness. You recall stories of travellers stepping onto what appeared to be solid ground, only to break through into hidden hollows or streams beneath the surface. Not always deep, not always dangerous, but in this cold, even a small mistake could become serious. You circle the edge instead, slowly. The smooth patch continues for several meters before giving way to more familiar uneven terrain. You step onto it again, testing carefully. Solid, for now. You continue forward, leaving the deceptive surface behind. Your stomach tightens again a little more insistently this time. Hunger is no longer a distant thought. It is a quiet companion walking beside you. Not demanding, not urgent, but present. You ignore it. There are more immediate concerns. The cold, the darkness, the absence of shelter. And somewhere just beyond the reach of your hearing, the memory of a single crunch that suggested you might not be entirely alone. You walk on, because stopping will not feed you, stopping will not warm you, and whatever is out there, whether real or imagined, is still better faced while you're moving than while you're standing still wondering how long your strength will last. You move beyond the smooth patch of hidden ground, and the forest seems to gather itself around you again. The trees close in, branches lower. Shadows thicken between the trunks until each gap looks like an entrance to somewhere colder. The ash still falls, but now it is harder to see. You feel it more than watch it, a soft settling on your shoulders, your sleeves, the back of your neck. Then something calls, a low sound, thin and distant. You stop. It comes again, floating through the trees with a wavering edge. Not a howl exactly, not a scream either. More like a brief ragged cry rising and falling before vanishing into the cold. You hold your breath. The forest answers with silence. After a moment, your mind offers a practical explanation. Fox, owl, some night creature going about its business, probably not composing a personal threat against you. Wonderful. Reasonable. Deeply comforting in the way that being told a strange noise is just the pipes comforts absolutely no one in an old house at midnight. You keep walking. The sound does not return, but its memory stays with you, changing the shape of the darkness. Every branch seems more watchful now. Every hollow at the base of a tree looks occupied. The forest, which felt empty before, suddenly feels crowded. Night animals are waking. You hear a flutter overhead, soft but distinct. Wings passing from one branch to another. You glance up just in time to see a pale shape shift against the darker sky. An owl, maybe. It settles somewhere above you, invisible again almost instantly. Owls have followed human imagination for thousands of years. In ancient Greece, the little owl became associated with Athena, goddess of wisdom, while in other places owls were treated as omens, messengers, or warnings. That is a lot of responsibility for a bird that is mostly interested in rodents. But history has never been shy about assigning symbolism to innocent wildlife. You take another careful step. The owl remains quiet. Somewhere to your left, snow whispers from a branch and falls in a soft patter. You turn too quickly, then steady yourself. Nothing there, just settling frost. You have to remind yourself of that. Just frost, just trees, just animals. The trouble is that just animals is not entirely reassuring when you cannot see them. You continue through the dark, guided now by sound and slight changes in texture beneath your boots. The snow is uneven here, broken by roots and patches of exposed earth. Your feet have become clumsy with cold, so you move slowly, lifting each boot with care. A faint track appears beside you. Small paired marks, a hopping pattern, rabbit or hare. You follow it with your eyes until it disappears beneath brush. For a moment you picture the animal tucked somewhere under roots, breathing fast ears alert body made for cold far better than yours. Hares can change their coat colour with the seasons in some northern regions turning pale to match snow. A clever adaptation, very stylish, extremely seasonal. You meanwhile have chosen the bold survival strategy of looking worried in the dark. A rustle breaks the thought. Close. You stop again. This time something moves in the brush ahead. You cannot see its shape clearly, only a low stirring beneath snow-weighted branches. It pauses when you pause. Your fingers curl inside your gloves. Then a small animal bursts out a dark streak crossing the open ground in front of you. It vanishes between two trunks before your mind fully identifies it. Fox, perhaps. Pine marten. Something lean and quick and absolutely unwilling to explain itself. Your heart beats hard for several seconds. Then you laugh once very softly. Not because it is funny exactly, but because the body sometimes needs to release fear in whatever form is available. The sound of your laugh seems far too human here. You lower your head and continue. In early modern Europe, forests at night were often described as places where the boundary between ordinary life and the unseen grew thin. People told stories of wild hunts, wandering spirits, and animals that were not quite animals. These tales were not simply entertainment. They expressed a practical truth at night in a forest. Human senses become poor tools. Folklore gave fear a shape so people could talk about it. You understand that now. A fox is less frightening than a nameless rustle. An owl is gentler than a voice in the branches. A hare is easier to accept than the feeling that something is keeping pace with you. Still the old stories press close. You pass a tree with a split trunk, its opening black and narrow. For a second the hollow looks like a face, a long mouth in the bark. You blink and it becomes only wood again. Good. Excellent. Thank you, brain, for contributing unnecessary artwork. You turn slightly away from it. The terrain slopes upward now, not steeply, but enough that your breathing deepens. You place one foot, then the next, leaning into the rise. Your thighs ache. Your chest works harder in the cold air. Each inhale brings that faint bitter taste again, though weaker beneath the resin and damp bark. Halfway up the slope you stop beside a thick trunk and listen. The forest is not silent anymore. It clicks, settles, brushes, exhales. Tiny lives move under snow. Wings adjust overhead. Frost tightens wood. Far away something calls once and stops. None of it is loud. None of it is dramatic. But together it forms a kind of hidden night music. Not comforting. Not exactly. But real. And real is better than the blank silence from earlier. Researchers still disagree about how much medieval fear of forests came from actual danger, and how much came from law, religion, and storytelling. Wolves did exist in many European woodlands, and banditry was a genuine concern on certain roads, but the forest also became a moral landscape in sermons and tales, a place where people could be tested or changed. Tonight you do not need a sermon. The temperature is preaching quite effectively. You push away from the trunk. At the top of the slope, the trees spread out, revealing a darker hollow below. The land dips gently, and somewhere within that hollow you hear a faint repeated tapping. Not a branch this time. Tap, tap, pause, tap. You narrow your eyes. A woodpecker would be asleep, surely. Ice might be dropping from one branch to another, or water could be moving under a frozen surface, striking stone or root. That possibility catches your attention. Water means risk, but also direction. Streams lead somewhere. Valleys lead somewhere. People have followed water for as long as they have walked. You start down the slope, slowly. The tapping becomes clearer for a few steps, then fades again. The hollow smells colder, damper. Snow lies thicker between the trunks. Your boots sink deeper, and each step takes more effort. Ahead a pair of eyes flashes. You freeze. 2 tiny points of reflected starlight low to the ground. They vanish, then reappear farther right. The animal remains unseen but small. Probably small. You wait, pulse quickening. After a few seconds, the eyes drop and disappear completely. You let out a careful breath. The forest has many watchers, but most are not hunting you. Most are simply trying to survive the same night. That thought helps. A little. You continue downward. The tapping is gone now, replaced by a soft murmur that might be air or water, or your own tired blood moving in your ears. You cannot tell. The slope levels out beneath your feet and the trees crowd close once more. Something brushes your sleeve. You turn startled. A branch. Just a branch. You close your eyes for one breath, then open them again. The night is alive around you. Not friendly, not cruel, simply alive. Owls, foxes, hares, hidden mice beneath the snow creatures whose ancestors have survived countless winters without once needing a weather app or a motivational podcast. You envy them a little. Then you walk on, following the faint murmur deeper into the hollow while unseen wings shift above you, and small paws mark the snow behind you, and the darkness feels less empty now, but much more awake. You follow the faint murmur down into the hollow, and the forest floor begins to change beneath your boots. At first the difference is only texture. The snow grows flatter, more compressed, as if many seasons of weight have pressed it into a hidden line. Then your foot lands on something firmer than frozen earth. You pause, scrape gently with the edge of your boot, and uncover a strip of old timber half buried beneath snow and ash. A plank. You stare at it for a moment, then you look ahead. The shape reveals itself slowly, not as a road in the modern sense, nothing smooth or generous, or thoughtfully maintained by a local council with reflective signs and cheerful budget problems. It is a rough track, narrow and sunken, running between the trees. The edges are raised where old ruts have frozen into place. Dead grass pokes through in brittle tufts. Here and there, broken pieces of wood lie across the path, remnants of a corduroy road, the kind once built by laying logs across wet ground. Human work, old forgotten but human. A small warmth moves through your chest, not physical warmth sadly, but the emotional kind that at least tries its best. You step onto the track. It holds. The snow is thinner here, packed by the shape of the road itself, and your walking becomes easier. Not easy. Nothing tonight is going to become easy apparently, but easier. Your feet no longer search blindly for roots beneath the snow. Your ankles stop twisting at every third step. The path has a memory and you borrow it. Logging roads like this once spread deep into forests across Europe, Russia, Scandinavia and North America. Timber-fed ships, mines, railways, houses, fences, fires, and all the hungry machinery of expanding societies. In some regions, winter was the preferred season for hauling logs because frozen ground and snow made heavy loads easier to move. The same cold that threatens you now once helped people drag entire forests toward markets and rivers. You imagine sledges moving here, horses breathing steam into the air, men in wool and leather calling to each other, axes biting wood, chains rattling, the smell of sweat resin smoke and animal hide. All of it gone now, leaving only this pale track beneath the falling ash. The thought steadies you. A road means direction. A road means purpose. Even abandoned roads usually connect something to something else. You follow it. The trees on either side stand straighter here, as if the old track still commands a little respect. Branches arch overhead, forming a tunnel of black lines against the sky. The ash drifts down through them in soft flakes, catching briefly on twigs before dropping to the road. Your breathing grows more regular. Step, breathe, step, breathe. You do not know where the road leads, but you know it was made by hands. That matters more than you expected. The forest no longer feels infinite. It has history underfoot. You pass a stump almost hidden beneath snow. Then another. The cuts are old, weathered smooth, their surfaces dark and cracked. You kneel briefly beside one, brushing away the ash. The stump is wide, perhaps from a tree that stood for a century or more before someone took it down. Saw marks remain faintly visible in the wood, softened by decades of frost and rot. The people who worked here must have known winter intimately. Not romantically, not as a postcard, but as labour. Cold fingers, wet socks, heavy tools, horses needing feed, men sleeping in rough camps where warmth depended on firewood taken from the same forest they were cutting. There is a strange little detail from logging history that feels both practical and faintly ridiculous. In some lumber camps, cooks were considered almost as important as foremen because hungry crews became slow, angry, and careless. A bad cook could ruin morale faster than bad weather. Some camps even judged newcomers by how well they handled enormous breakfast of beans, bread-fried meat, and coffee strong enough to make a spoon nervous. Your stomach tightens at the thought. Terrible timing, memory. You straighten and continue. The road descends gently. The faint murmur returns now clearer on your right. Perhaps a stream. Perhaps wind moving through a lower gap in the land. You cannot see water yet, only darkness between trunks and a low pale ribbon of snow. Your thirst wakes again. You ignore it for now. A stream might help, but it might also complicate everything. Thin ice, wet boots, slippery banks. Water is life, yes, but winter enjoys making even life-threatening. Very elegant. Very unnecessary. The logging road curves left. You follow the curve. As you move, you notice scattered signs of old labour. A rusted metal ring embedded in a stump, a broken length of chain half swallowed by roots, a small pile of stones marking where the track may once have drained toward the hollow. Each object appears briefly in the dimness, then slips behind you. People were here. Not recently, not usefully, but here. The comfort of that begins to fade as another thought arrives. People leave places for reasons. Timber exhausted, roads abandoned, camps dismantled, fires gone cold. The forest reclaims what it can slowly but thoroughly. And now you're walking inside that reclamation, a guest in a workplace the trees have taken back. Some historians question whether abandoned forest roads were as deserted as official maps suggest. Rural people often used them long after companies moved on for gathering fuel, hunting visiting neighbours, or avoiding tolls on better roads. Paper records say a route ends. Local feet may disagree. Tonight you're grateful for every unofficial foot that helped keep this line faintly open. You continue along the road. The cold is sharper in the hollow. It gathers along the track, flowing downhill like invisible water. You feel it around your knees first, then your hands. Your fingers pulse with dull discomfort, which is unpleasant but also reassuring. Pain means sensation. Sensation means they are still yours. You tuck your hands beneath your arms for several steps, walking awkwardly, shoulders hunched. It helps a little, not enough, but enough to keep going. The road narrows. Young trees grow in the middle of it, now thin saplings rising from the old ruts. You weave around them, careful not to catch your boots. One branch scrapes your cheek, cold as wire. You flinch, then keep moving. Ahead the track rises slightly toward a darker shape. At first you think it is another fallen tree, then the shape resolves into two upright posts. You stop. They stand on either side of the road, leaning inward, connected by nothing now. Perhaps they once held a gate, perhaps a sign. Snow clings to their tops like small white caps, and ash has striped their sides in grey. You approach slowly. There are no words carved into them, at least none you can read in the dark. One post has a rusted hinge plate. The other bears a scar where a latch might have been. A gate means boundary. A boundary means something lay beyond it. Camp, yard, storage shed, private land, a clearing. Your pulse quickens, though your body is too tired for true excitement. You pass between the posts feeling absurdly as if you were entering a place that still remembers being closed. Beyond the gate, the old road widens. The trees pull back. Not far. Not enough to reveal a building. Not yet. But the ground opens into a broad, uneven space where snow lies smooth over buried ruts. The air smells different here, less resinous, with a faint trace of old damp wood. You stand at the edge of the clearing listening. No voices, no fire, no horses breathing steam. Only the low murmur from the hollow, the occasional creak of frozen trees, and your own breath moving slowly in the dark. Still, this is the strongest sign of human presence you have found. You step forward into the clearing, your boots pressing into snow over ground once shaped by labour, trade, hunger and heat. Somewhere in this open space there may be shelter, a collapsed shed, a stack of old timber, a tool hut forgotten by time. Or there may be nothing. The forest does not promise, but the road brought you here, and for now in the deep cold that is enough to make you keep searching. You step further into the clearing and the forest loosens its grip just enough to make you notice the difference. The space is not large, but after so many tightly packed trees it feels almost open. The sky above stretches wider here, revealing more stars through the drifting ash. Their light is faint, distant, but it gives shape to the ground in front of you. Snow lies smoother across this area, broken only by shallow depressions and the vague suggestion of old tracks long buried beneath layers of seasons. Your boots sink slightly deeper with each step, the surface less compact than the road behind you. You move carefully. The cold feels stronger here. Without the trees close around you, there is nothing to soften it. It settles directly against your body, pressing inward from all sides. You feel it most in your hands again. The dull ache has deepened, spreading into your fingers with a slow, insistent pulse. You stop and lift your hands, flexing them. They respond, slower than before. You clench them into fists, then release. Again. Again. The movement helps, but only a little. You tuck them beneath your arms, pressing them against your ribs, borrowing whatever warmth you can still generate. Your breath clouds thicker now. Each exhale lingers in front of your face before drifting upward, dissolving into the ash. You watch it for a moment, the simple act strangely calming. Then you look around. The clearing holds shapes. Low mounds beneath the snow, darker patches where something interrupts the surface. You move toward the nearest one, your steps deliberate, your attention sharp. It turns out to be a pile of wood. Old timber stacked once with intention, now partially collapsed and frozen together. You brush away the top layer of snow, revealing rough cut ends, weathered and grey. Some pieces are split cleanly. Others have rotted at the edges. You crouch beside it. This was not random. Someone gathered this wood, cut it, stacked it, prepared it for use. That alone changes everything. In many logging camps, wood piles like this were essential not just for construction but for survival. Firewood had to be cut and stored in advance, often in large quantities, because once winter settled, in fully gathering fresh wood became far more difficult. Camps that failed to prepare properly paid the price quickly. You run your gloved hand over the surface. The wood is solid, in places brittle in others. You test a smaller piece, trying to break it. It resists at first, then snaps with a sharp crack. Dry. Not completely, but drier than what you found earlier. You pause. Fire returns to your thoughts. Stronger this time. Here in this clearing with wood that might actually burn, the idea feels less like a fantasy and more like a possibility. You look around quickly, scanning for anything else that might help. A structure. A wall. Anything. Your eyes settle on a darker shape near the far edge of the clearing. You stand, slowly. The shape is low, uneven, partially hidden beneath snow and shadow. It could be another wood pile, it could be something else. You start toward it. Each step feels heavier now, your legs responding with a slight delay. You focus on your footing, placing each boot carefully. The snow shifts beneath you, but holds. As you approach, the shape resolves. A collapsed structure. You stop a few paces away. It might once have been a small shed. The roof has caved in, the walls leaning inward. Timbers broken and scattered. Snow has filled the interior, smoothing out the collapse into a shallow mound. You circle it slowly. One side still stands partially upright, a section of wall held together by frozen joints and stubborn wood. A gap remains near the base, just large enough to peer inside. You crouch. The interior is dark, but not entirely empty. Beneath the snow you can make out more wood. Broken beams, planks, fragments of what might have been shelves or supports. Shelter. Not complete. Not safe, but something. You hesitate. Entering a collapsed structure carries its own risks. The remaining wood could shift. The snow inside could hide uneven ground. But compared to open exposure, even partial cover might offer an advantage. You lean closer, testing the stability of the standing wall. It holds. For now, there is a small, almost forgotten detail from winter survival practices. Even minimal barriers can make a difference. Blocking wind, trapping a pocket of slightly warmer air, reducing exposure to falling snow or ash. These small changes can slow heat loss just enough to matter. You consider your options. Stay outside exposed, or take a chance inside. The decision feels less like a choice and more like a necessity. You push aside a loose board near the gap, widening the opening just enough to crawl through. The wood creaks softly but does not collapse. You pause, listening, then move forward. Carefully. You lower yourself into the structure, one hand bracing against the ground, the other holding the edge of the opening. Your knees sink into snow, but beneath it you feel something firmer. Packed earth, perhaps, or old flooring. Inside the air feels different. Stiller. Less exposed. You sit back slightly, taking a moment to adjust. The space is cramped, uneven, but it shields you from above. The ash does not fall directly here. The wind, if there was any, cannot reach you as easily. It isn't warm, but it is less cold. You exhale slowly. Your breath lingers in the confined space, forming a faint haze before fading. You watch it, then lower your gaze to your hands again. They tremble slightly now, not violently, just enough to notice. You rub them together, then press them against your chest. The movement is slower, more deliberate. You're aware now of how quickly small tasks have become effort. You look around the interior. Broken wood lies scattered, some pieces partially buried. You reach for one, lifting it carefully. It is lighter than expected, dry enough to snap with pressure. Better. You gather a few more pieces, stacking them loosely in front of you. Fire. The idea returns again. Here it might work. Here it might last. But you hesitate. Because starting a fire is not just about wood. It requires ignition, spark, flame, something you may or may not have. You check your pockets again, slower this time, more methodical. Your fingers fumble, slightly less precise than before. You pause, steadying them, then continue. Because in this small broken shelter, surrounded by the remnants of human effort, with the cold pressing closer and your strength beginning to fade, the possibility of fire is no longer just a thought. It is a question you need to answer, and you're running out of time to answer it. You sit within the broken shelter, hands hovering over the small pile of gathered wood, and for a moment everything narrows to this single decision. Fire or no fire? Your fingers move through your pockets again, slower now, less certain. Fabric feels thicker than it should, seems harder to navigate. You press your thumb against each object you find, trying to identify it by touch before pulling it free. Nothing. Then something. A small familiar shape. You bring it closer to your face, squinting in the dim light. A lighter. You stare at it as if it might disappear. It doesn't. A quiet, almost disbelieving breath leaves you. Of course. One of those ordinary objects that rarely matters until it matters completely. The kind of thing you carry without thinking until suddenly it becomes the difference between discomfort and survival. You turn it in your hands. Your fingers struggle slightly with a motion clumsy from cold. You adjust your grip, press your thumb against the wheel and flick. A spark. No flame. You pause. Try again. Another spark, brief and bright. Still nothing. You inhale slowly, steadying your hand. Then you remember something important. Cold can affect lighters. The fuel inside does not behave well at low temperatures. It becomes sluggish, reluctant. Just like everything else tonight. You bring the lighter closer to your body, cupping it between your hands, letting what little warmth you have transfer into it. You hold it there for several seconds, your breath warming the small space between your palms. Then you try again. Flick! This time a small flame appears. It is weak trembling, but real. You stare at it transfixed. Fire! It flickers in the cold air, a tiny defiant thing, but it is enough. You lower it carefully toward the wood. The first piece resists. The flame licks at the surface, then pulls back as if reconsidering the effort. You adjust, choosing a thinner fragment, something with more edges, more chance for the fire to catch. You hold the flame beneath it. Wait. The wood darkens slightly. Then slowly it begins to smoke, a thin thread at first curling upward in the still air. You lean closer, shielding the flame with your hands, feeding it gently, patiently. Firemaking, you recall, is often described as an art of patience rather than force. Early humans likely spent countless hours learning how to coax flame from reluctant materials. It was not instant. It was not guaranteed. It was a negotiation. You are negotiating now. The smoke thickens. Then at last a faint glow appears at the edge of the wood. It spreads slowly, almost cautiously. A small flame catches. You exhale, careful not to disturb it. Then you add another piece, placing it gently beside the first. The flame flickers, dips, then rises again, feeding on the new material. You adjust your position, creating a small cluster, a fragile structure that might grow into something more. The fire builds. Not quickly, but steadily. You sit back, slightly watching it. The light changes everything. The interior of the shelter, once dark and uncertain, now reveals its shape more clearly. Broken beams lean at odd angles. Snow has gathered in uneven drifts along the edges. The ground beneath you is a mix of old wood and packed earth. The flame dances across it all, casting shifting shadows that feel almost alive. You extend your hands toward it. Carefully, the warmth is immediate. Not strong, not overwhelming, but real. It touches your skin, sinks into your fingers, and for the first time since entering the forest, you feel something other than cold pressing against you. Relief. It comes quietly without drama, but it is there. There is a curious historical practice among some northern communities where people would carry small embers in containers, not just to start fires, but as a form of reassurance. A glowing coal, even when not actively burning, represented safety, continuity, control. It was a piece of warmth that could be carried through the cold. You understand that instinct now. Even this small fire feels like control. You feed it another piece of wood, then another. The flames grow slightly stronger, more confident. They crackle softly, the sound filling the small shelter with something other than silence. It is a gentle noise, almost comforting, like a quiet conversation. You lean closer, letting the warmth reach your face. Your cheeks tingle as sensation returns. Your fingers ache more sharply now, the dull numbness giving way to something more intense. It is not pleasant, but it is a sign that circulation is returning. You welcome it. Across history, there are accounts of people misjudging this stage, assuming that warmth has returned fully when it has only begun. Some would relax too soon, stop moving, let the fire do all the work. But heat alone is not enough. The body needs time, movement, care. You keep your hands moving slightly, flexing your fingers, rotating your wrists. Stay awake. Stay aware. The fire steadies. The shelter feels smaller now, more contained as the light fills it. The shadows retreat to the edges, though they never fully disappear. They linger in the corners, watching quietly as if waiting for the flame to falter. You glance toward the opening. The forest beyond is darker than before. The firelight does not reach far. It spills out only a short distance, illuminating the immediate ground before fading into black. Beyond that, the trees stand as silhouettes tall and still. You listen. For a moment there is nothing, then faintly a sound. a soft movement in the distance. Not close, not immediate, but there, you hold still, your attention sharpening. The fire crackles beside you, its sound masking smaller noises. You lean slightly toward the opening, trying to separate one sound from another. The movement stops. Silence returns. You wait a few seconds longer. Nothing follows. You ease back, though the awareness does not fade entirely. Animals are drawn to warmth sometimes, or to light, or simply to curiosity. There are stories of foxes approaching camps of wolves circling just beyond the reach of firelight, watching without attacking. Whether those stories are entirely accurate or shaped by imagination is still an open question, but the idea lingers. You feed the fire again. The flames rise, pushing back the cold just a little more. You sit there, hands extended, body angled toward the warmth, and for a brief moment you allow yourself to feel something close to safety. Not complete, not guaranteed, but real enough to matter. Outside the forest remains cold and watchful. Inside the fire burns, and for now that is enough. The fire continues to burn in its small, careful way, and you sit close enough to feel its warmth without trusting it too much. That is an important distinction now. Trust in this forest must be rationed. You feed the flames another narrow piece of wood, watching the edge catch, darken, glow, and finally bloom into orange. The shelter fills with that gentle crackling sound that human beings have loved for longer than anyone has been writing things down. It is soft enough to soothe, but lively enough to keep you from drifting too far inward. Still, the woodpile is not infinite. You look at the small stack beside you and count without counting. A few pieces, enough for a while. Not enough for the whole night unless you're careful. Your eyes move toward the opening. Beyond the broken wall, the clearing lies under ash and starlight. The forest waits in layered darkness. The old logging road, your faint thread of human history, disappears between the trees behind you. Ahead, somewhere beyond the clearing, the land dips toward that possible murmur of water. You know you cannot stay here forever. The shelter is partial. The fire is small. The roof above you is collapsed, and the remaining timbers hold their positions with the confidence of furniture assembled by someone who refused to read the instructions. A creak passes through the wall. You pause. The structure settles but does not fall. Very reassuring, in the way a sleeping bear is reassuring because it is technically asleep. You breathe slowly and look upward through a gap in the ruined roof. The sky is clearer now. The ash still drifts, but thinner, and the stars show through in scattered clusters. They seem impossibly cold, white points set into a deep black distance. You lean back just enough to see more of them, keeping one hand near the fire. For thousands of years, travellers have used the night sky to find direction. In the northern hemisphere, Polaris, the North Star, has served as a steady guide, because it appears close to the North Celestial Pole. Sailors, desert caravans, herders, hunters, and ordinary people walking home in the dark have all looked upward for orientation when the ground refused to help. You search for it. At first the sky seems too crowded and too sparse at the same time. Bright points everywhere, but no obvious pattern. Your tired eyes struggle to connect them into shapes. You look for the familiar arrangement of the Big Dipper, the pointer stars that lead toward Polaris. You find what might be it, then doubt yourself. Another cluster looks similar, then another. The cold has a way of making certainty slippery. You shift closer to the fire, warming your hands again. A faint pain returns to your fingertips, sharper now. You flex them gently, then hold them out palms toward the heat. The skin prickles, almost burns, though the flame is small. Warmth returning to numb flesh is not always kind. It comes back like an argument. You let it happen. Outside the clearing glows faintly in starlight. Snow and ash reflect the sky, creating a dim silver surface. The old gateposts stand like dark sentries at the far edge, leaning inward, as if still discussing whether you were allowed through. You study the stars again. There are stories, of course. There are always stories. Some northern people saw the aurora as spirits' fires, bridges' omens, or reflections from distant realms. Some communities warned children not to whistle at the lights, fearing they might come closer. Tonight there is no aurora, only stars, but the idea of the sky listening feels easy to understand. In a place this quiet, even looking upward feels like speaking. A strange little star-related custom comes to mind. In parts of old rural Europe, people sometimes believed that counting stars could bring bad luck, especially if done aloud. The reason varied from place to place. You might invite wandering spirits, lose your wits, or accidentally count your own remaining years. A charming range of options. Very relaxing material for a cold night. You do not count them. Wise? Instead you search for direction. If you can identify north, you can make better sense of the old road. If the road ran along the hollow, perhaps it led toward a river. If it served a logging camp, it may connect to a larger track. If people hauled timber in winter, they likely brought it toward water or settlement. Roads have habits, even ruined ones. But the stars blur slightly. You blink. For one uneasy moment the sky seems to tilt. The branches framing it shift like black hands. You steady yourself with one palm against the ground. Exhaustion. Not panic. Not mystery. Just a body that has been cold too long, walking too long, thinking too hard. You lower your gaze. The fire needs attention. You add another small piece, then rearrange the others so the flames do not collapse inward. The task demands care. Too much wood at once and you smother it. Too little and it fades. Fire-like hope becomes annoying when poorly managed. The flame catches again. You nod satisfied. A quiet question rises in your mind. Stay until the fire dies or leave while you still have warmth in your body. Neither option is pleasant. Staying offers rest, but rest invites sleep. Leaving means cold movement, but movement may bring you closer to rescue. Your shelter is temporary. Your wood is limited. The night is not over. The debate among archaeologists continues over exactly when and how early humans mastered habitual fire use, with evidence interpreted differently at sites across Africa, Europe and Asia. Some researchers see regular control very early. Others think consistent use became common later. Tonight the academic nuance is interesting, yes, but your conclusion is simpler. Whoever learned to keep a flame alive deserves applause. Quiet applause, obviously. We're trying not to wake the forest. You listen again. The clearing is still. The night animals have withdrawn from the immediate edge of firelight. Perhaps they are watching from farther away. Perhaps they have more sensible plans. Your own plan is beginning to form, fragile but necessary. You will warm yourself as much as you safely can. You will use the stars to choose a direction. You will leave before the fire tricks you into sleep. The thought feels stern but correct. You lean toward the opening, studying the sky through the broken roof and beyond the clearing. There perhaps is the pattern you need. A dipper shape low between branches, 2 stars along its outer edge. Follow their line outward. Their faint but steady, a modest star that does not look important unless you know what to ask of it. North. Maybe. You almost laugh at the uncertainty. Maybe north is better than no direction at all. You turn the idea over in your mind. If that is north, then the old road behind you runs roughly west to east across the clearing. The murmur in the hollow lies south or southeast. Water often leads toward lower ground. Logging roads often follow water or climb away from it toward cut areas. A settlement might lie downstream or upstream, helpful. You close your eyes briefly, then open them at once. No sleeping. Not here. Not yet. You take the last few moments beside the fire seriously. You warm your hands, then your face. You loosen your shoulders. You flex your toes inside your boots. You drink no snow and eat no imaginary lumber camp breakfast, which feels unfair, but historically consistent with your situation. The fire crackles softly, shrinking and rising, shrinking and rising. It cannot come with you. That is the hardest part. Human beings are very good at becoming attached to small circles of warmth. A hearth, a candle, a lamp in a window, a campfire in a ruin. Light creates a center. It says, stay here, this is where the world makes sense. But the world outside the shelter has not become safe just because this corner became bearable. You gather one small burning stick and consider carrying it. Then you look at the ash, The snow, the brittle branches, your clumsy fingers, and the long, dark road ahead. No, too risky, too awkward, too easy to drop, too easy to waste attention. You place it back into the fire. The flame accepts it. You sit for 3 more breaths. 1, 2, 3. Then you rise. Your knees protest. Your back stiffens. The cold reaches for you immediately as if it has been waiting just outside the warmth, patient and polite. You take one last look upward at the stars. Polaris, or what you hope is Polaris, holds steady through the gap. You step toward the opening, carrying no flame, only its brief warmth in your hands and face, and the old human habit of looking at the sky when the earth refuses to explain itself. You crawl out through the broken opening and leave the small fire behind. At once the cold comes around you like water. It fills the space under your collar, slides along your sleeves, settles into the folds of your clothing. The warmth you gathered inside the shelter remains for a few precious moments, glowing faintly in your hands and face, but it is already fading. You can feel it thinning as if the forest is gently taking it back. Behind you the fire crackles once. You turn your head. Through the gap in the collapsed wall, the flame shines low and orange, a tiny domestic miracle inside a ruin. It looks almost friendly. That is dangerous. Friendly things are very persuasive when you're tired. You face forward again. The stars wait above the clearing. The old road lies behind you, the possible water ahead, and the direction you chose by the sky holds in your mind with fragile confidence. You begin walking toward the darker edge of the clearing, away from the shelter, away from the last easy warmth. Your boots press into the snow, soft, then firmer, then soft again. The clearing seems larger now that you are crossing it alone. The open sky exposes you. The trees at the far edge look like a wall built from shadow and patience. You keep your pace steady, not fast enough to waste strength, not slow enough to invite stiffness. Then you hear someone speak your name. You stop. The sound is so faint that it might have been only breath. A whisper carried from behind you, a shape of syllables rather than clear words. You turn slowly. The shelter sits in darkness, firelight trembling through the broken wall. No one stands there. You listen. Nothing. Your heart beats harder, and the sound of it seems to fill your chest, your ears, the entire clearing. You swallow, and your throat feels dry enough to scrape. You know the likely explanation: fatigue, cold, isolation. The mind pulling familiar patterns out of empty sound. A creak becomes a voice. A crackle becomes a word. Your own breath caught by a collar or branch becomes company. Still knowing does not make it pleasant. During long polar expeditions, travellers often recorded strange auditory experiences, especially during exhausting marches. Some heard music, some heard voices, some felt a companion walking just behind them. Modern psychologists might describe these as sensory misperceptions under stress, but the people living through them rarely found the explanation quite so tidy. You continue walking. The snow crunches underfoot. A few paces later, the whisper returns. Not your name this time, something softer, almost a sigh. You do not turn around immediately. You keep moving because turning every time the forest makes a suggestion is a quick way to become a very cold statue. The edge of the clearing draws closer. The trees rise ahead, their trunks black and vertical. Ash has gathered on the lower branches in pale lines. Between them the darkness seems thick enough to touch. You enter it. The sound changes at once. The open clearing falls behind you and the forest closes round your steps. Your boots no longer crunch as loudly. Needles and old leaves under the snow soften the ground. The air smells of bark ash and a faint dampness that may still be water somewhere below. You listen for the murmur. There, ahead and slightly to the right. You angle toward it. A voice speaks again. This time it is not behind you. It is beside you, just beyond the trunks. You freeze one hand braced against a tree. The sound is low and brief, like someone murmuring from another room. You cannot make out words. You cannot even be sure it is human. The forest holds the sound for a moment, then absorbs it completely. You breathe in, slowly, then out. Your breath shakes a little. There are old stories from nearly every cold region about voices in winter landscapes. Sami traditions, Slavic tales, Alpine legends, northern Japanese folklore all have some version of sound that lures, warns, or mocks the traveller. A person hears a loved one calling from the trees, a stranger promises shelter. A child cries from the snow, usually the wise listener does not follow. Very useful advice if only the stories also included a nice warm map. You wait until your breathing steadies. Then you turn not toward the voice, but toward the water sound. That is your rule now. Follow what can be explained. Ignore what wants attention. The murmur grows clearer as you descend. Snow gives way to harder crust in patches. Roots cross the ground like black ropes. Your boots slip twice, but you catch yourself both times, though the second correction sends a jolt through your knees. Your body is tired. Not tired in the ordinary sense. Not the pleasant heaviness after a long walk where home and tea and clean blankets are waiting. This is a deeper fatigue, quieter and more dangerous. Your thoughts move more slowly. Decisions require more effort. You have to remind yourself of things that were obvious a minute ago. Keep moving. Do not sit. Do not follow voices. Simple rules, good rules. You repeat them silently. A soft laugh comes from the dark. You stop again. It is not loud. It is not even clearly a laugh. It might be water under ice. It might be branches rubbing together. It might be your mind exhausted and unhelpful, adding social commentary to frozen timber. Still the sound raises the hair along your neck. A curious winter belief from parts of rural Scandinavia warned travellers not to answer voices heard in deep forest or on frozen lakes. Even if the voice sounded familiar, you were supposed to stay silent. Speaking back gave the voice a claim on you. A superstition, yes. But tonight silence feels like good manners. You say nothing. The laugh does not return. You move on. The ground slopes more steeply now. You can hear water more clearly, a muffled running beneath something solid. It is not open, not fully. The sound seems trapped under snow and ice, moving through hidden channels. Your thirst stirs again. Your mouth is dry, your lips tight. You imagine cold water, clear and sharp, and the thought is almost painful, but you know better than to rush. Hidden water in winter is never casual. It waits under crusts, under snow bridges, under surfaces that look safe until they are not. You slow down. The voices fade as the water grows louder, or perhaps your mind simply has something else to focus on. That's the useful thing about practical danger. It crowds out imaginary danger, mostly. At the bottom of the slope you stop beside a fallen tree. Its roots rise from the ground in a frozen fan packed with snow and dirt. You lean against it briefly, not resting, just stabilizing. The bark presses hard against your side. You listen. Water ahead, a creek above. Your breath. No voices. For now, some historians of exploration argue that many eerie wilderness accounts were shaped later when survivors turned confusion into meaningful narrative. Others suggest the strange perceptions themselves were real experiences of cold, hunger, fear, and solitude. Standing here, you do not need to choose. The voice may be a trick, the fear is not. You push away from the fallen tree. The water is close now. You can smell it faintly mineral and clean beneath the ash. The air near it feels colder, sharper, more open. Through the trunks ahead, the ground turns pale and flat again. Ice. You take one careful step toward it, then another. Behind you from far up the slope, the fire gives one final crack that sounds almost like a word. You do not look back. You keep your eyes on the frozen ground ahead, following the real murmur beneath the snow, while the imagined voices settle behind you like ash in the dark. You stand at the edge of the pale surface and listen to the river breathing under snow. It does not sound like open water. There is no bright rush, no clear splash over stones. Instead, the sound is muffled and low, a hidden movement beneath layers of ice, snow, and darkness. It is the voice of something alive under a locked door. You take a careful step closer. The ground changes again. Beneath your boot, packed snow gives way to a smoother crust faintly glossy where starlight touches it. The ash lies thinly over the surface, making the ice look dull and powdery. That is almost worse. Clean ice might show cracks, bubbles, dark water below. This ash-covered surface hides everything. You crouch beside it, but not on it. Your knees complain. Your hands are stiff. You ignore both. The river is narrow, perhaps, or perhaps only the visible part is narrow. Snowbanks curve along either side, soft and rounded. Low branches lean over the channel, their tips frozen into little white claws. Somewhere beneath the surface, water slips past stones, persistent and cold. Rivers have always drawn travellers because they offer direction. Ancient roads often followed waterways, and settlements grew beside rivers for transport, food, washing, milling and trade. In winter, frozen rivers could become roads themselves, smooth highways across difficult land. Useful, yes. Also occasionally treacherous enough to make you question humanity's enthusiasm for shortcuts. You lean closer, studying the surface. There are no obvious footprints crossing here. No animal trail. No sign that anything sensible has recently trusted this ice. That seems worth respecting. Your thirst presses at you. The sound of water makes it worse. Your mouth feels dry and your throat tightens whenever you swallow. You imagine breaking through a thin edge, scooping cold water in your hands, drinking carefully. The idea is beautiful. Dangerous, but beautiful. You look for an opening. The river bank is uneven. Snow has drifted along the edges, forming overhangs that may hide gaps beneath. A dark patch appears several paces downstream, where the ash seems thinner and the snow dips slightly. You move toward it, slowly keeping one foot on solid ground whenever possible. The dark patch is not open water. It is thin ice. You can see faint motion beneath it, a shadow sliding under cloudy glass. You stop. Number? Not there. A strange little custom from parts of northern Europe involved listening to ice before crossing it. Travellers would strike it with a pole, an axe handle, or even a boot, then judge the depth and strength by the sound. Clear ringing suggested stronger ice. A dull thud could mean weakness. Naturally, this system required both experience and a pole, and you currently possess neither, unless one counts cautious anxiety as a measuring instrument. You search along the bank for a branch. There are several, but most are brittle twigs. Finally, you find a thicker fallen limb half buried in snow. You pull it free, shaking off ash and crystals. It is not sturdy, but it is long enough to test the ice from a safer distance. You tap the surface. Once, a dull sound. You tap again harder. The ice answers with a muted knock, followed by a faint crackling whisper that travels away from the point of contact. You step back immediately. Good. Excellent. The river has spoken, and its message is absolutely not. You continue downstream along the bank instead. The old logging road may connect the water somewhere safer. Perhaps there is a ford, a bridge, a crossing marked by stones. Timber workers would have needed ways across. They would not have relied on guessing in the dark, at least not every time. People in the past made many questionable decisions, yes, but some of them were quite practical. You move with the branch in one hand, using it as a staff. It helps more than you expected. The extra point of contact steadies you on the uneven bank. Each time your boot slips, the branch catches some of your weight. The river runs beside you, hidden and steady. After a while, the bank narrows. Trees press close on your left, and the snow slopes down toward the ice on your right. You slow even more, placing each step carefully. The thought of wet boots now feels almost unbearable. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just cold water soaking your socks, freezing your feet, stealing what little warmth remains. A small disaster in ordinary life. A major one here. Many winter deaths in historical records begin with wet clothing. Not the grand catastrophe people imagine, but a soaked sleeve, a boot through ice, a fall into a stream. Wool could retain some warmth when damp, which made it valuable, but even wool had limits. Cotton famously was less forgiving in cold weather. Your clothing, whatever its modern conveniences, suddenly feels very thin compared with the old rule stay dry or suffer. You glance down at your boots, still dry, for the moment that feels like a victory worth quietly celebrating. Ahead the river sound changes. It becomes brighter, more broken, as if water is moving round exposed stones. You see a darker interruption in the pale surface, a place where snow has not fully covered the channel. You approach carefully, heart-lifting despite yourself. There is open water, a narrow gap no wider than your arm span flowing black between lips of ice. Steam does not rise from it, but the water looks somehow warmer because it is moving. It slips around two stones, whispering over them alive and unreachable, unless you get very, very careful. You crouch at the bank. The edge is undercut, too fragile to kneel on directly. You use the branch to scrape snow away from a firmer patch, then test the ground with your weight. It holds. You lower yourself, slowly bracing one hand against a root. Your fingers ache in the cold. You remove one glove only partway, just enough to free your fingertips. The air bites immediately. You reach down, but the water is still too far. You look around frustrated, then notice a curled piece of birch bark frozen near the root. Birch bark. You pry it loose with effort. Birch bark has been used for containers, canoes, torches, writing surfaces and roofs in many northern societies. Its natural oils make it surprisingly resistant to water, and it can even burn when damp. Tonight it becomes something humbler, a tiny scoop which is not glamorous, but neither are most good survival tools. You fold it slightly, reach toward the gap and dip. The first attempt fails, water slips away before you can lift it. You try again. This time a shallow mouthful collects in the bark. You bring it to your lips and drink. It is painfully cold. Clean or clean enough. It shocks your teeth, tightens your throat, and sends a hard brightness through your body. You pause, breathing through the sensation. Then you drink a second small scoop. Not too much, not too fast. The water settles in you like a warning and a blessing at once. You pull your glove back on, immediately clumsy with urgency. Your fingertips burn now, and you press them against your chest, waiting for the pain to soften. Across the river, something moves. You lift your head. On the far bank, between two trees, a dark shape stands motionless. Your first thought is human. Your second is animal. Your third is that you are too tired for this nonsense. You stare. The shape remains still tall and narrow. Then, after several long seconds, it lowers its head and steps sideways. Antlers, perhaps, or branches behind it. A deer. Maybe a young elk in another part of the world. It moves with careful quiet, then vanishes among the trees. Your breath returns. People once treated deer trails as natural guides through dense forests, and with reason. Animals often find efficient routes to water shelter and open ground. Some indigenous travel routes and later colonial paths followed older animal tracks, turning instinct into infrastructure over time. The deer is gone now, but its presence suggests the far bank has a way through. The problem is crossing. You examine the river again. Not here. No chance. The ice is too uncertain. The opening too awkward. The consequences too severe. You rise, slowly leaning on your branch. The water has helped, but the crouching has stiffened your legs. You flex your knees, then your toes. Still moving, still dry. The old question returns upstream or downstream. Water flows downhill. Settlements often wait downstream, but logging operations may have used upstream camps storing timber near cut sites before hauling it out. Ancient travellers, traders, soldiers, refugees all learned that rivers could guide and trap in equal measure. You choose downstream, not because you're certain, because certainty is unavailable tonight and the river is at least going somewhere. You step away from the water's edge, keeping parallel to its hidden course. The branch staff taps softly ahead of you, testing the snow. The murmur follows at your right side, steady beneath ice. Behind you, the open gap in the river disappears into darkness. Ahead, the bank curves between trees, and you continue along it, colder now in the legs, clearer in the mind, carrying the sharp taste of winter water, and the knowledge that one careless step could still undo everything. You follow the river downstream, keeping just far enough from the edge to respect it. Respect tonight mostly means suspicion. The branch in your hand taps the snow ahead of each step. Sometimes it meets solid ground. Sometimes it sinks into soft powder. Once it punches through a thin crust into empty space beneath, and you stop so quickly your whole body tightens. You shift left away from the hidden hollow and continue. The river murmurs beside you under its frozen lid. It is easier to think now that you've drunk a little water. Not easy exactly. Your thoughts still move like tired travellers themselves, wrapped in blankets and complaining quietly. But they are clearer than before. The sharp cold of the water has woken something in you. For a while anyway. The danger now is not panic. It is sleep. You feel it beginning in the soft places of your mind. A gentle dullness behind the eyes. A wish to slow down. A temptation to believe that one short rest would be sensible. Reasonable, even. You could sit beside a tree just for a moment, tuck your hands beneath your arms, close your eyes until the dizziness passes. No. You say it silently. No. There are old military accounts from winter campaigns where officers had to keep exhausted soldiers moving through bitter nights because men who sat down in snow sometimes did not rise again. During Napoleon's retreat from Moscow in 1812, cold, hunger, fatigue and confusion broke the army as much as battle did. Many survivors describe the terrible pull of stopping how rest seemed merciful just when it became most dangerous. You understand that pull now? It is not dramatic. It is gentle. That is what makes it frightening. You force yourself to speak quietly just to hear a human sound. Keep walking. Your voice is rough and small, swallowed quickly by the trees. Still it helps. You take 10 steps, counting them in your head. Then another 10. Then another. Counting gives the mind a railing to hold. You do not count too high because large numbers feel discouraging. 10 is enough. 10 can be done. 10 again. 10 more. This is not heroic. This is accounting with boots. Your hands ache around the branch staff. You switch it from one hand to the other, then tuck the colder hand inside your coat for a few steps. The movement is awkward, but it breaks the rhythm just enough to keep you alert. The river bends right. You follow. The forest here is lower and denser. Branches hang close to the bank, their tips glazed with ice. Some touch the snow and vanish into it, forming little arches like doorways for creatures far smaller and more sensible than you. Your staff catches on one and the branch trembles, dropping crystals over your boot. You blink slowly. Too slowly. You shake your head. Wake up. People in cold places have long used songs, prayers, jokes, and repeated phrases to stay alert during exhausting travel. Sled drivers sang to maintain rhythm. Sailors chanted while hauling lines. Pilgrims recited prayers step by step. The content mattered less than the pattern. A repeated sound can hold the mind together when the body wants to fold, so you begin to tell yourself a story. Not a grand one, just fragments. A logging crew once came this way. Their sledges hissed over packed snow. Their horses snorted white clouds. Someone complained about the cook. Someone else claimed the coffee could remove rust from tools. The men laughed because laughing was warmer than silence. They passed between these same trees or trees like them, and the road behind you was not abandoned then. It was alive with work, irritation, hunger, and the ordinary human talent for grumbling through hardship. You keep walking. The story walks with you. A peculiar bit of winter folklore from the Alps said that if a traveller felt sleep coming on in dangerous cold, they should bite their own glove or sleeve to shock the body awake. Not hard enough to injure, just enough to create discomfort. A crude trick. Possibly useful. Definitely not the sort of advice that makes it into elegant travel brochures. You consider it. Then you pinch the skin at your wrist instead through the fabric. The sting is small but immediate. Good. You take another 10 steps. The forest ahead darkens. For a moment you think you see a light. You stop. There between the trunks downstream a faint pale flicker. Not orange like fire, not steady like a lamp. More like starlight reflected from ice trembling as branches shift overhead. You stare until your eyes water. The flicker remains, then disappears when you move your head. Reflection, probably. You do not chase it. That feels like progress. The river widens slightly, or at least sounds wider. Its murmur deepens, spreading under the snow. The bank becomes flatter, easier to walk, though the snow is crusted in patches that break under your weight. Each break sends a small jolt up your legs. You welcome the discomfort. Discomfort keeps you here. You begin rotating through little tasks. Flex fingers. Wiggle toes. Look for solid ground. Listen for water. Count 10 steps. Repeat. Your world becomes small, almost peaceful in its narrowness. There is no past except the fire behind you, no future except the next visible patch of snow. You're simply a moving body beside a hidden river under stars in a forest that does not care whether you succeed, but will allow you to try. Some researchers still dispute how much pre-modern travellers understood the medical stages of hypothermia, since their language often framed cold as weakness, fate, divine judgment, or bad luck rather than physiology. Yet their practical advice was often sharp, keep, dry, keep moving, stay together, do not sleep in the open. They may not have used modern terms, but they understood the night. You wish you had someone with you. The thought arrives suddenly and aches more than expected. Not even someone useful. Just someone annoying enough to keep talking. Someone to complain about the cold, misidentify constellations and insist the river was probably fine while you both wisely avoided it. Human company, even irritating company, would be a kind of shelter. But there is only you, so you become your own company. You speak again low and steady. 10 more, and you walk. The phrase becomes a little ritual. 10 more to the crooked birch. 10 more to the fallen branch. 10 more to the patch where the snow looks smoother. 10 more because stopping would be too easy. The ashes nearly stop falling now. Only a few pale flecks drift through the branches. The sky above the river is clearer and the stars seem sharper. Cold often does that, clarifying the night until it looks almost polished. Beautiful, yes. Beautiful in the way a knife can be beautiful. Admire it carefully. You pause beside a large stone near the bank, not to sit, only to lean. You press one hand against it and feel the cold stored inside. It is astonishing how thoroughly stone can hold winter. You pull your hand back quickly, flexing your fingers. No sitting. You push onward. The river curves again, and with the curve comes a faint change in the air. A broader openness ahead. You cannot see much yet, but the trees seem less crowded. The sound of the water spreads outward, less trapped between banks. Perhaps the river joins a wider stream. Perhaps the land opens into a marsh or meadow. Perhaps there is another old road. Possibility is enough. Your eyelids grow heavy again. You pinch your wrist. Harder this time. Then you count aloud, barely above a whisper. 1, 2, 3. Your voice joins the river, quiet and human. By 10, you're moving better. By 20, the urge to sleep has retreated a little. By 30, the trees ahead have begun to separate, revealing a paler stretch of night beyond them. You keep going. Not because you feel strong. Because you have made a rule, and rules are useful when hope becomes tired. Do not sit. Do not sleep. Follow the river. Count 10 more. And in the cold, under the watchful stars with the hidden water murmuring beside you, you obey those small rules as if they were ancient laws written just for this night. The pale stretch ahead widens, and the river leads you toward it one careful step at a time. You do not hurry. Hurrying is for people with warm feet, clear maps, and confidence in the ground. You have none of those luxuries. You have a branch staff, a stubborn rhythm, and the small rule that has carried you this far. 10 more. The trees thin as you approach the opening. Their trunks stand farther apart, and the snow between them lies flatter, brushed smooth by cold air moving along the river corridor. For the first time in a while, you feel a faint current against your face. Wind. Not strong but present. It slides over your cheek, sharp and dry, taking with it the last comfortable memory of the fire. You lower your chin and keep walking. Open ground may mean a way out. It may also mean colder air, deeper snow, and less protection. The forest apparently enjoys offering help with small legal disclaimers attached. You reach the edge of the trees and stop. Before you lies a broad frozen meadow pale under the stars. The river bends along its right side, half hidden beneath snow and ice. Beyond the meadow, darker lines rise again, more trees, or perhaps a low ridge. The space feels enormous after the crowded forest, though it is probably modest by daylight. At night, everything unlit becomes dramatic. You test the ground with your staff. Solid. You step forward. The snow here is crusted firm enough to hold for a heartbeat, then break beneath your weight. Each step sinks with a soft crunch, forcing your knees to lift higher. The effort burns in your thighs. Your breath grows louder and little clouds drift behind you like tired ghosts. This is the longest hour, not by clock, because you have no reliable clock now. It is longest by feeling. The hour when the body has spent its easy reserves. The hour when the cold seems to discover new doors into your clothing. The hour when thought becomes narrow and strange. In many accounts from winter marches, the time before dawn is described as the cruelest part of the night. Temperatures often reach their lowest point near or shortly after sunrise, especially under clear skies. People expected dawn to save them, but the cold frequently deepened just before light returned. Very rude, really. Morning should be more polite. You cross the meadow slowly. At first the open sky helps. Stars spread above you in a glittering field, and the river gives a steady sound on your right. Then the openness begins to feel threatening. There is no trunk to lean against, no branch to break the wind, no shadowed cluster of evergreens to promise even imaginary shelter. You are exposed again. Your hands have gone stiff around the staff. You try to flex them, but the movement is clumsy. Your fingers feel swollen inside the gloves, though you know they are probably not. Sensation has become unreliable. Pain comes and goes in waves. Sometimes your fingertips burn, sometimes they seem distant. You switch the staff to your other hand and tuck the colder one beneath your arm. Keep the fingers moving. Keep the blood moving. Keep yourself moving. You repeat the instructions silently, but the words blur. A small dark mound appears ahead in the snow. You angle toward it, hoping for a rock, a log, anything that might break the monotony. As you approach, the shape resolves into a low pile of brush, perhaps carried here by spring floods and frozen in place. Thin branches protrude from it like ribs. You do not sit beside it. You want to. That is exactly why you do not. Instead, you stand near it and turn your back to the wind for a few breaths. The brush blocks almost nothing, but almost nothing has become a meaningful category. You flex your toes inside your boots. Right foot, left foot. Both respond slowly. Good. You move on. There is an unusual old belief from parts of the Carpathians that the coldest hour before dawn belonged to wandering spirits, because even fires weakened then and people spoke less. Whether anyone truly believed this literally varied from village to village, but the image is powerful. The world hushed flames, sinking humans curled under blankets, and outside the cold making its final inspection. You feel inspected. The meadow stretches ahead. The far side seems no closer. This is another trick of darkness and fatigue. Distances lose honesty at night. A line of trees may be 50 paces away or 500. A low ridge may be a shadow. A light may be a star caught in branches. Your mind keeps trying to complete the scene, and you keep reminding it not to get creative. Then you hear a sound behind you, a soft crunch. You stop. The wind brushes your face. The river murmurs. Your own breath comes fast from the effort of crossing the snow. You turn. Nothing visible. The meadow behind you is pale and empty, marked only by your broken trail. It stretches back toward the trees you left, which now form a dark wall beneath the stars. You listen. No second crunch. You should continue. You know this. Instead, you stare a moment longer. Lonely fear has a way of wanting evidence. It asks the dark to prove it is harmless. The dark not being under contract declines. You turn forward again. Step. Crunch. Step. Crunch. There are debates among historians of emotion about how people in the past described fear differently from us, often tying it to morality, divine warning, bodily humours or social duty. Yet beneath the language, the physical facts remain familiar. Quick breath, tense muscles sharpened, hearing the urgent desire not to be alone in the dark. Across centuries, fear keeps a steady vocabulary in the body. Your body speaks it fluently now. You reach another patch where the snow crust holds better, and your walking becomes smoother. The relief is immediate. You lengthen your stride, slightly careful not to overdo it. The river curves closer, its hidden current louder. You can almost feel the open channel, somewhere under the snow, a dark vein running through the meadow. The wind shifts. For 1 second it carries a smell. Not smoke. Not yet. Something earthy. Old grass under snow, frozen reeds, mud sealed beneath ice. The meadow was likely wetland in warmer months. A marshy place unpleasant to cross in summer, easier in winter if frozen solid. People have used frozen wetlands as seasonal routes for ages, moving sledges, animals and goods across ground that would swallow wheels in spring. Winter, for all its cruelty, sometimes opens roads where summer closes them. You look down at the snow. Another seasonal road, then, a place useful only when dangerous. That feels appropriate. Your eyelids droop again. You catch it quickly and begin counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. The words come out rough, barely formed. By 10 you are still moving. By 20 you add another task. Name what you can sense. Cold face. Wet breath. Hard staff. River right. Stars above. Snow breaking. You repeat these observations, simple and plain. They keep you anchored. They keep the world from becoming only white and black and tired. Near the centre of the meadow, the wind grows stronger. Not fierce, but steady enough to strip warmth from your cheeks. Your eyes water. The tears chill almost instantly at the corners, and you wipe them away with your glove. The far tree line is finally closer. You can see individual trunks now. More importantly, you see the land rising slightly beyond them. Higher ground, perhaps drier, perhaps a road, perhaps nothing. But the sight gives shape to your effort. Your legs ache. Your shoulders ache. Your hands ache. That is good, you tell yourself. Pain means you are here. You push through another 10 steps. Then another. A faint greyness touches the eastern edge of the sky. At first you think it is imagination because you want it too badly. You stop walking and look again. The stars above remain sharp but low in one direction. The darkness has thinned. Not dawn, not yet. Only the earlier suggestion that night can end. You stand very still. The cold remains severe. The meadow remains dangerous. Your body remains tired enough to bargain with bad ideas. But the sky has changed. That is real. You take a breath and it trembles. Then you move again toward the far trees, carrying that pale line inside you. Like a coal that cannot warm your hands, but might just keep your mind awake until the world begins to return. You keep your eyes on that faint grey line in the east. As you reach the far edge of the meadow, it is not much, just a thinning of darkness, a suggestion rather than a promise. But it changes something inside you. The night no longer feels endless. It feels like something that can be endured. You step beneath the first trees. The wind eases immediately. Branches catch it, break it, soften it into a faint whisper that moves through needles and bare limbs. The contrast is startling. After the open meadow, even this slight shelter feels like stepping indoors. You pause for a moment not to rest, but to adjust. The forest here is different. The trees are spaced wider apart, their trunks thicker, their roots less tangled at the surface. The ground slopes gently upward and the snow lies in shallower drifts. Your boots sink less, your steps grow steadier. Better. Not safe, better. You keep moving. The river bends away from you, now its murmur fading behind the trees. You let it go. Water guided you this far, but the rising ground ahead feels more important now. Higher ground means drier soil, and drier soil often means paths, clearings, or human use. At least that is the hope. You follow the slope. Your legs protest immediately. The climb is not steep, but after everything, even a gentle incline feels like a challenge. You lean slightly forward using your staff as support, pushing upward one careful step at a time. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The rhythm returns. Somewhere behind you, far out in the meadow, a faint sound echoes. A call. You freeze. It carries over the open space, thin and distant. Not the cry of a fox this time, not quite. It rises, breaks, then fades. You do not turn. Whatever it is behind you. Behind you is the night you've already survived. Ahead is something else. You continue climbing. There is a long tradition in mountain and forest travel of not looking back too often in difficult conditions. Not because of superstition, though, those exist in abundance, but because looking back slows you, unsettles your balance and distracts your focus. Practical advice dressed sometimes in myth, but practical all the same. You keep your eyes forward. The grey line in the sky grows slightly wider. You notice it without stopping. Your breath comes in deeper pulls now, your chest working harder against the cold air. Each inhale feels sharp, each exhale visible and slow. You focus on keeping it steady. In, out, in, out. The trees thin again as you climb, not into another open meadow, but into a looser arrangement where the ground beneath them is clearer. Fewer low branches, fewer hidden roots. The snow here is patchy, revealing frozen earth and old grass beneath. You step onto it gratefully. The firmer ground changes your pace. You can walk more naturally or stride, less cautious. Your staff taps lightly instead of sinking, and the sound feels almost reassuring. Tap, step, tap, step. There is a curious detail in some early travel accounts from northern regions where people described good ground almost with affection. After hours of struggling through snow marsh or forest debris, a stretch of firm earth felt like a gift. You understand that feeling now. This patch of frozen grass might as well be a paved road. You move across it with care, but also with something close to relief. Your hands have improved slightly, still stiff, still slow, but more responsive than before. You flex your fingers again, testing them. They obey. Your feet, too, feel more present. The dull numbness has shifted into a heavier sensation, like wearing thick layers that are not quite yours. You stamp once lightly, just to feel the impact. Still there. Still working. You keep going. The slope levels out near the top and the trees part just enough to reveal something beyond them. A darker line. Horizontal. Straight. You stop. Your eyes narrow, trying to make sense of it in the dim light. It could be a fallen tree. It could be a shadow. It could be number. As you take a few steps closer, the shape resolves. A fence. Bold. Wooden posts, some leaning, connected by strands of wire that sag between them. Snow has gathered along the base, and ash has settled on the top edges, but the structure is unmistakable. A boundary. A sign of land that was once claimed used, divided. You approach slowly. Fences have been used for centuries to mark ownership, control livestock, protect crops, or simply define space. In colder regions, they often followed natural lines, edges of forest ridges, watercourses because those were easier to maintain. This one runs along the crest of the slope, separating the forest from something on the other side. You reach out and touch one of the posts. The wood is cold and rough beneath your glove. It feels solid enough though weathered. The wire beside it is taut in places, slack in others, its surface dulled by time. You follow the fence line with your eyes. It stretches to your left and right, disappearing into the trees. You step closer, peering through it. Beyond the fence, the land opens. Not a wide meadow like before, but a gentler clearing with fewer trees and more visible ground. The snow is thinner there, broken by patches of grass and low shrubs. The terrain looks used, or once used. Your pulse quickens slightly. Fences do not appear in the middle of nowhere without reason. They mark something. You look for a gate. There, a few meters to your right, a section of the fence dips lower, the wire broken or removed. The posts lean inward, creating a narrow gap. You move toward it. Your legs feel heavier again, but the sight of the opening pulls you forward. You reach the gap and step carefully over the lower wire, lifting your foot just high enough to avoid catching. You pass through. On the other side, the ground feels different. Less wild, more open. You turn briefly, looking back at the fence. It stands there quietly marking the line you've crossed. Then you face forward again. The grey light in the east grows stronger now, though the sun is still hidden below the horizon. The sky shifts from black to deep blue, then to a faint cold silver. You can see more. Shapes become clearer. The ground ahead reveals subtle variations, tracks perhaps or old paths. Low structures might lie farther on, though it is too early to be certain. You take a few steps forward. Then you stop, because on the air, just faintly carried by the slightest movement of wind, there is a smell. Smoke. Not the bitter ash that has followed you all night. Something warmer. Something human. You inhale, carefully testing it. Yes, smoke. Distant. Faint. But real. You stand there for a moment, letting the realization settle. After hours of cold silence and uncertainty, this is different. This is a sign. Fire somewhere ahead. Shelter, perhaps. Or at least people. Your body reacts before your mind fully catches up. Your posture straightens slightly. Your steps, when you take them again, carry a little more purpose. Not faster, not reckless, but directed. You move toward the scent, following it across the open ground, guided now not just by instinct or survival, but by the possibility of warmth that is not your own fragile creation. Behind you the forest recedes. Ahead the faint promise of smoke draws you forward, and above the sky continues its slow, quiet shift toward morning. You follow the scent of smoke as if it were a thread laid carefully across the land just for you. It is faint, so faint that if you stop breathing for even a moment you lose it. You find yourself inhaling more deliberately, now slower, deeper, testing the air like someone learning a new sense. Each breath carries a trace of it. Wood smoke, soft and familiar, layered over the cold. Not ash, not bitterness. Fire that is being used. That difference matters more than you can explain. You move forward across the uneven ground, your boots pressing into thinner snow, sometimes meeting patches of frozen grass beneath. The terrain here feels shaped, not wild. Subtle rises and dips suggest long use, even if that use has faded. You keep your pace steady. It would be easy to rush now. Too easy. The idea of warmth ahead of shelter of human presence presses against your thoughts like a promise. But promises in places like this must be approached carefully. A misstep even now could undo everything. So you walk, step, breathe, step, breathe. The sky lightens further. The grey line in the east has grown into a pale band, stretching wider with each passing minute. The stars above begin to fade, their sharpness softening as dawn prepares its slow arrival. The forest behind you is no longer a single dark mass, but a collection of individual shapes, each tree distinct. You glance back once. The fence is barely visible now, a faint line against the rising light. You've come farther than it feels. Ahead the scent strengthens, just slightly, enough to confirm direction. You angle toward it, moving between scattered trees and low shrubs. The ground becomes firmer, less broken by roots, more consistent underfoot. Your staff taps lightly, no longer needed for every step, but still helpful. You notice something else. Tracks, faint but there. Not animal this time. Human. Boot prints partially filled with snow leading in the same direction you're walking. They're old, perhaps a day or two, but unmistakable. The shape is clearer than anything you have seen all night. You stop and look at them, then follow. Paths created by repeated human movement have guided travellers for centuries. Even when formal roads vanish, the memory of feet remains in the ground. Shepherd trails, hunting paths trade. Routes some lasted generations, others only seasons. This one feels recent enough to matter. You place your steps near the prints, not directly in them, but close enough to use their guidance. Your body feels different now. Still cold, still tired. But something has shifted. The heaviness in your limbs is less oppressive. Your thoughts, while slow, feel more connected. The act of moving towards something real, something tangible, has changed the rhythm inside you. Hope, perhaps? Careful hope. There is an odd little tradition in some rural communities where the first smoke seen in the morning was considered a sign of life returning to the world. Chimneys meant people awake, fires lit, food being prepared. After long nights, especially in winter, that thin line of smoke carried reassurance far beyond its size. You understand that instinct now. Even without seeing it, the smell alone carries weight. You continue along the faint trail. The land rises slightly, then dips again, revealing more open ground beyond. The trees thin, further replaced by scattered bushes and low growth. The snow here is patchy, broken by darker earth beneath. You see it then. At first it is just a shape, a darker block against the pale ground. You slow. The shape resolves slowly as the light improves. A structure. Small, low. Perhaps a cabin or a shed. Your heart lifts, then steadies itself. Do not assume. Do not rush. You approach carefully. The tracks lead toward it, confirming what your eyes suggest. The structure stands alone, its roof sloping gently, its walls dark against the snow. Smoke rises faintly from one side, barely visible, now that the light has grown, but enough to confirm what you already sensed. You stop a short distance away. Listen. No voices, no movement, just the faint crackle of a fire from within. You take a step closer, then another. The door faces you slightly ajar. You pause. There is a quiet moment here where everything feels balanced on a thin edge. After the long night, after the cold and the silence and the uncertainty, this small structure represents something immense. Warmth, shelter, possibility, but also the unknown. You stand there breathing slowly, letting the moment settle. Then you move forward, because standing still is no longer the goal. You reach the door and place your hand against it. The wood is cold, but not as cold as the forest. There is warmth on the other side. You can feel it faintly seeping through. You push gently. The door opens with a soft creak. Inside, the light is dim but steady. A small fire burns in a simple hearth, its glow filling the space with a warm golden colour that feels almost unreal after the blue-grey world outside. The air is warmer, not hot, but warm enough to feel like relief. You step inside, carefully. The floor beneath your boots is solid wood. The walls close around you, blocking the wind, holding the heat. The smell of smoke is stronger here, mixed with something else, old wood perhaps, or the faint trace of something cooked long ago. You close the door behind you. The sound is soft but final. For a moment you just stand there, letting the warmth reach you, letting your body begin to understand that for now the night has loosened its grip. There are still questions. Who built this place? Who uses it? Whether anyone will return? But those questions can wait. For now you have crossed the forest. You have found fire that is not fading. And as the first real light of dawn begins to touch the world outside, you stand in a space where survival feels at last within reach. You stand just inside the doorway, and for several breaths you do nothing at all. The cabin holds you in a warmth so modest that under ordinary circumstances you might barely notice it. Tonight it feels almost extravagant. The fire in the hearth is small, built from split wood, arranged with practical care, and its flames move slowly over a bed of red coals. Someone knew how to make it last. Someone expected the night to be long. You lower your staff to the floor. The sound is quiet, but inside four walls it feels enormous. You listen. No answer. No footstep from another room. No voice, no sudden clearing of a throat from a shadowed corner, which is kind of the cabin, really. You have had enough surprises for one night. The room is simple. A rough table stands near one wall. A narrow bench sits beside it. Hooks hold a coil of rope, a lantern without glass, and a heavy wool coat stiff with age. Near the hearth, a stack of cut wood waits in a neat pile. Not much, but enough. You take one careful step closer to the fire, then another. Your body wants to collapse toward the warmth. You resist. This is not the time to become careless. Cold bodies need warming, yes, but not with sudden foolishness. You keep a respectful distance from the flames, letting heat reach you gradually. People in cold regions learn this through hard experience. Warming too quickly near a fire could cause pain, dizziness, or injury to numb skin. Old survival advice often warned travelers to restore heat slowly, especially to fingers and feet. The hearth is not a magic cure, it is a tool, and tools require patience. You remove one glove. Slowly, your fingers emerge stiff and pale, curled slightly from gripping the staff. You hold them near the warmth, not too close, and begin moving them. Bend, straighten, bend, straighten. The pain returns in bright little sparks. You welcome everyone. The cabin smells of smoke, dry wood, old cloth, and dust. Beneath it all is a faint sweetness, perhaps, from pine boards warming near the fire. It is a human smell even in the absence of people. Walls keep memory better than trees do. You turn toward the table. On it sits a tin cup, an iron spoon, and a small wooden box. The objects are plain, but after the endless forest they seem almost ceremonial. Proof of habits, proof of hands. Someone drank here, stirred something here, stored something here. You do not open the box yet. Instead, you look toward the window. A single small pane clouded at the corners with frost faces east. Through it you see dawn gathering at the edge of the world. The sky has softened from black to blue, from blue to grey, from grey toward a pale wash of silver. The trees beyond the cabin stand less like threats now and more like witnesses. You have reached the edge of the forest, not entirely out of danger, but near enough to feel the shape of return. Cabins like this were common in many frontier logging and herding landscapes. Some were permanent homes, others were seasonal shelters, hunting huts, line cabins or way stations used only when work or weather demanded it. Their value was not beauty. Their value was existence. A roof, a hearth, a door that closed. Civilization in its most compact and persuasive form. You move to the woodpile and add one small split log to the fire. It catches slowly, sending up a thin ribbon of smoke before the flame settles along its edge. You watch carefully to make sure the draft carries the smoke upward. It does. The chimney works. Bless whoever built it. May their descendants always find matching socks. Your stomach tightens again. Hunger returns now that immediate fear has softened. You glance at the wooden box on the table, then at the shelves along the wall. There are 3 jars all empty and a cloth sack folded flat. No food, no miracle breakfast, no heroic stew waiting in a pot because history is often rude about catering. Still, warmth is something. Shelter is something. You sit on the bench very slowly. The wood is hard and cold at first, then tolerable. You keep your feet planted, your hands moving, your eyes open. Sitting is allowed now only because the fire is real, the walls are real, and dawn is coming. Even so, you do not lie down. Not yet. A peculiar old practice among some woodland workers was to leave a little dry kindling in remote huts for the next traveller. It was not always charity in a sentimental sense. It was practical, mutual survival. Today you help the stranger. Tomorrow you may be the stranger. Tonight you're very much the stranger, and someone's old habit may have kept you alive. You look around with new gratitude. The cabin may have been empty for hours, days, or longer, yet the fire was alive when you arrived. That fact remains strange. Perhaps someone stepped out and will return. Perhaps the coals were banked by a person who expected to come back by morning. Perhaps the place is used more often than it first appears. You listen again. Outside the world is changing. The deep night sounds have retreated. No fox call, no imagined voice, no owl wing near the roof. Instead, there is the faint drip of melting frost near the eaves, the gentle settling of snow from branches the river far away, quieter now under the growing day. You stand again after a few minutes because movement still matters. At the door you lift the latch and open it a narrow way. Cold air enters but weaker than before. The land outside is visible now. A rough track leads away from the cabin across open ground, curving toward a line of trees that is lower, thinner, less forbidding. Beyond that you can see a pale break in the landscape, perhaps a field, perhaps a road, perhaps the beginning of a settlement hidden just out of sight. Your breath catches. There is smoke beyond the pines, not just from this cabin. Farther away, a second faint column rises into the morning. then another both thin and grey against the brightening sky. Chimneys, homes, people waking, fires being stirred, kettles set on, ordinary life continuing with no idea how beautiful it looks from here. You step outside onto the threshold. Only the threshold. The snow glows faintly in dawn light. Your own tracks lead back into the dark trees, a crooked record of the night. Soon wind or thaw or more ash may soften them. The forest will begin erasing you again. But not yet. For now the marks remain. You turn back into the cabin, close the door gently, and return to the fire for one more measured warming. You're not finished. There is still distance to cover, still the final crossing from survival into safety. But the edge is near, and with the cabin behind you, the first full light ahead, and the smell of human smoke rising beyond the pines, you understand that the frozen forest no longer surrounds you completely. It is becoming something you have passed through. You leave the cabin only after the fire has given back enough feeling to your hands and feet that walking no longer seems like an act of pure negotiation. The door closes softly behind you. Morning has not arrived all at once. It has seeped into the world little by little, filling the spaces between trees, washing the snow with pale silver, softening the hard edges of the night. The sky in the east is brighter now, a quiet band of light spreading behind the pines. The stars have faded, the ashes nearly stop falling. You stand still for a moment looking back at the small cabin. In daylight or something close to it, the place seems humbler than it did in the dark. A rough shelter, weathered boards, a leaning roof, smoke lifting gently from its chimney. Yet to you it feels almost grand because survival changes the scale of things. A door becomes mercy, a wall becomes wisdom, a hearth becomes civilization itself. You turn toward the track ahead. It curves away from the cabin through low trees and frozen grass. The snow is thin here, marked with old boot prints, animal tracks and the faint lines of sled runners or cartwheels beneath the crust. This is no untouched wilderness. People have moved here, worked here, returned here. You follow the track. Your steps are slow but steadier than before. The staff taps beside you, though now it feels less like a lifeline and more like a companion you have earned. Your body aches in layers, feet, thighs, back, shoulders, hands. Everything reports in, everything has opinions. Still, you are moving towards smoke. That is enough. For much of human history, smoke on the horizon was one of the clearest signs of settlement. Before electric lights, paved roads, or phone signals, a column of smoke could mean a hearth, a camp, a kiln, a forge, or a village waking into the day. It was not always safety, of course, but it meant people. And after a night alone in deep, cold people are no small thing. The track passes between pines whose branches hang heavy with frost. As daylight strengthens, the forest becomes less monstrous and more detailed. You see bird marks in the snow, tiny needles scattered beneath trees, the yellow-brown curve of old grass poking through near-exposed roots. The world is returning from symbol to substance. A jay calls somewhere ahead. The sound startles you, then comforts you. A normal bird making a normal morning complaint. Lovely. Even the forest has decided to resume office hours. You keep walking. The smoke beyond the pines grows clearer. One column rises from behind a low ridge, another farther left, thin, steady lines climbing into the cold air. You imagine hands stirring coals, someone stepping into boots, someone opening a door and squinting at the morning. Ordinary gestures, sacred now, though they do not know it. There is a curious old custom in parts of rural Europe and Asia of keeping the household fire alive overnight whenever possible. Letting it die could mean wasted labour in the morning, but it also carried symbolic weight. The hearth represented continuity, family, and protection. A live ember at dawn meant the house had carried warmth safely through darkness. You think of the cabin behind you. Someone kept that ember alive, or left enough for it to be revived. Either way it mattered. The track rises gently. At the top you stop. Below you, beyond a fringe of bare birches, lies open ground. A field. Beyond the field, several small buildings sit close together, their roofs pale with frost. Smoke rises from 2 chimneys. A fence line borders the nearest yard. There's a woodpile stacked against a shed. A narrow road clearer than any path you've seen all night runs past the buildings and disappears toward the brighter horizon. You stand there almost unable to move. Not because you're too tired, though you are, because the sight is too simple. A place, a real place, after the endless repetition of trees after the ash, the river, the voices, the meadow, the dark. This small settlement feels like an answer written plainly on the land. You begin down the slope. Careful still, always careful. The final stretch is not the place for dramatic confidence. Snow hides roots even in victory. History is full of people who survived impossible things, and then slipped on something ridiculous afterward. You will not become that footnote today. The closer you get, the more details appear. A gate standing open, a bucket frozen beside a post, tracks leading from one building to another, a line of laundry stiff as boards beneath a porch roof. Life paused in winter but not defeated. Some researchers still differ on how isolated woodland dwellings truly were in past centuries. Maps can make them look remote, but networks of footpaths, seasonal roads, kinship ties markets, and shared labour often connected even scattered households. Isolation was real, yes, but rarely absolute. People survived cold landscapes by making webs of obligation. You have reached one of those webs at last. A dog barks. You stop. The sound comes from near the nearest house, not angry exactly, alert. A second bark follows sharper. Then a door opens. A figure steps out. They are bundled in wool face, partly hidden posture, stiff from morning cold. For a moment they simply look at you from across the yard. You must be quite a sight. Ash on your coat, frost on your sleeves, eyes hollow with sleeplessness, holding a branch staff like some tragic forest wizard who has had a very disappointing evening. You raise one hand. Slowly. The figure calls out. You cannot make out the words, but the tone is human, startled, concerned. "That is enough!" You take another step, then another. The dog barks again, then falls quiet as the person comes forward. Another door opens behind them. More movement, more voices. The world, which had narrowed to breath and snow and cold, widens suddenly with human presence. You do not need to explain everything at once. Not the ash, not the voices, not the old road, the river, the fire in the ruin, the stars you used as a guide. Explanations can wait. Warmth comes first. The person reaches you near the gate and takes your arm with careful firmness. Their glove is rough against your sleeve. They guide you toward the house, speaking in low, practical phrases the kind people use when they understand that comfort begins with simple actions. Inside there will be heat, a chair, water, maybe tea, maybe soup, maybe just a blanket and a place to sit where the cold cannot reach you so easily. And as you cross the threshold, you look back once toward the forest. It stands beyond the field, dark at its base, pale at its tops, no longer endless. The trees are only trees now, though you know better than to underestimate them. The frozen forest has not changed. You have. You've carried its night inside you and come out with the dawn. The door closes. Warmth gathers around you. Your hands begin to loosen. Your breath steadies. And the long cold night becomes something that can finally move from danger into memory. Now the morning softens. The room around you grows quieter, not because it is empty, but because safety has a different sound. It is the low murmur of voices in another room. It is the careful settling of a blanket over your shoulders. It is the faint clink of a cup placed nearby, the sigh of a fire breathing in the hearth. The slow return of feeling to tired hands. You sit still. There is nothing more to prove. Outside, the forest remains where it has always been, holding its snow, its old roads, its hidden rivers, its hollow trees, its small bright-eyed animals beneath the crust. The ash settles into the morning and becomes only a pale dusting on branches. The fear of the night loosens its fingers one by one. You breathe in warmth. You breathe out the cold. In your mind, the journey begins to blur at the edges. The ruined shelter, the fox tracks, the stars, the river under ice, the long meadow before dawn. They drift together now, not as threats, but as images passing gently behind closed eyes. And maybe that is how survival becomes a story. Not all at once, slowly, a step remembered, a sound softened, a danger placed at a safe distance. The fire in front of you glows low and steady, and the chair beneath you holds your weight without asking anything. You let your shoulders drop, you let your hands rest. The room is warm enough, the morning is bright enough, the forest is far enough away. For now you do not need to walk, you do not need to listen for hidden footsteps, you do not need to count 10 more. You can let the numbers fade. One breath, then another. The snow outside shines quietly. Smoke rises into the pale sky. Somewhere a bird begins again, small and ordinary and alive. And you are here, safe in the hush after the storm, safe beyond the trees, safe in the tender light of morning. So let the frozen path disappear behind you. Let the cold release your name. Let the last ember of the night settle into peace. Sleep now softly while the forest rests beyond the window and dawn keeps watch in a whisper. Sweet dreams,